Hello and welcome back to a series of spooky stories, The Haunted Tea Spill. This series is brought to you by all things spooky and ungodly amounts of paranormal activity. I know it's been a minute since I've done a traditional story, so here we go. And it's also been a minute since we've done a spooky shirt of the day. Here we are with my ghost on a bookcase going a full year strong. The link is down here now under the story. Haunted Mirror. When I was 9, my grandmother and I were leaving from visiting my little sister. My grandmother noticed some bedroom furniture outside and fell in love with this dresser mirror. She asked my sister's stepmom what they were doing with it, and she told my grandma that she could have it. We loaded it into the truck and took off. My grandma was a bit of a hoarder, so we didn't have any particular spot for the mirror, so we just put it in the hallway, just leaning up against the wall. My bedroom was right next to the mirror. My first encounter with the mirror was later that first night, coming in hot. I was coming out of my room for dinner when I saw a boy around 6 in overalls standing next to the mirror. I can still picture him clear as day. I turned and yelled for my grandma, but of course he had disappeared when I looked back. We were not strangers to ghosts, things turning on and off, voices, or even things being moved. But this was different. Yeah, because you saw that little shit. Ooh. It was the first full person figure I ever saw. I knew it was coming, I guess. Over the next few weeks, we would encounter more activity around the house. My grandma started seeing the little boy too. At least you didn't feel too crazy because she was also seeing the little boy and you didn't have to worry about her believing it. You know what I mean? Things were getting moved and we were hearing more voices. I remember getting a brand new coloring book and putting it on my art table. The next day I went to use it and the book was open and a page was scribbled on. I was the only child in the house, so we thought that it was just the ghost boy. After we acknowledged the mirror has a ghost attached to it, things started getting worse. The activity became more violent. Oh, no, no, no. Things started being thrown. I remembered my uncle and I were in the kitchen talking. There was a pantry on one side, and we were at the sink on the other side. There was a brick on the pantry shelf. Why was there a brick on the pantry shelf? How my uncle was standing, he saw the brick be picked up from the shelf and thrown at us. He caught it before it hit us. Oh, fuck no. Call the priest immediately. The house felt dark. I was scared to go past the mirror because I felt like someone was watching me. Why do we still have the mirror though? We know that that's what started all this. So why is it still there? Am I the only one that thinks this? Or my grandma finally moved the mirror to her bedroom. Grandma should have moved the mirror out the fucking house. In doing so, we noticed there were drawing on the back of the mirror. Words, doodles, scribbles. We decided to draw what we saw and wash the back of a mirror with the Mr. Clean eraser to get rid of it. We let it dry and when we came back, there were new words and drawing appeared. We turned the mirror back over and realized that there were what looked like scratches coming from the inside of the mirror. And it's still in your house? That's crazy. We left it alone and my grandma decided to talk to our pastor about it. He told us that it seemed that the mirror was a gateway for spirit. Aren't mirrors portals anyway? Like they're considered portals? So, yeah. He came and blessed the house, but it didn't get better. Because you still have the motherfucking mirror. What do you mean? Of course it's not gonna get better. Over a few more weeks, my grandma and my grandpa and I came down sick. We all felt constantly drained of our energy until one day I was in my grandma's room and I felt like someone was watching me. I looked over to the mirror and saw the little boy's face in it. I ran to my grandma, scared to death. She decided that she had enough of the mirror and removed it from the house to the barn. The moment that mirror left our house, everyone got their energy back. My grandpa came home from work bragging about how good he felt, not even knowing that the mirror had been removed. We decided that we needed to get rid of the mirror. It fucking took you. Are we so for real? My grandma talked about how the mirror was going to a relative and how she'd love the mirror. So fucked up. We loaded the mirror up a few days later and took it to the dump. Oh, thank God. That would have been so mean. She told me later something about how she was worried that the ghost would stay around if they knew what we were really doing. That day will stay forever in my mind. I remember my grandma backing the truck up to the dumpster. The dumpster was lower than the ramp where the vehicles were parked. My grandma and I pulled the mirror out of the back of the truck and tossed it down into the dumpster. When the mirror shattered, smoke rose from the mirror higher than the treetops. That has been the first and only time I've seen smoke emitting from a broken mirror. I'm 29 now and since have been more sensitive to ghosts, but that mirror remains my scariest encounter. Y'all took too motherfucking long to get rid of that bitch. You knew what was causing all the issue, and you just left it. mercy. Anyway, rate on a scale of 1 to 10, one being least scary, creepy, spooky, 10 being the most. If you have a story of your own that you want to submit, you can do so on the link tree in my profile. See y'all at the next episode. Stay spooky, friends.
Someone sent me a story saying that when they were younger, they played with a Ouija board and then had a terrifying sleep paralysis incident that seeped into reality. So we're going to call this person Ryan for the story. So when Ryan was 15 years old, he had never had anything paranormal happen to him. In fact, he didn't even believe in the paranormal. Well, one day, Ryan is on the phone with his best friend, Caden, and they're just watching TikToks together while they're on the phone. And they come across a paranormal story about a Ouija board. Well, as I stated previously, Ryan doesn't believe in the paranormal, so he's kind of mocking this, if you will, when his best friend is like, listen, I actually have a Ouija board in my attic. Then Caden mentions that his parents are actually planning to get rid of the Ouija board, and so they decide that they want to play it. So they planned a sleepover and decided that they were going to play this Ouija board to see what it was all about. Ryan did say in the email that this was one of the biggest mistakes he had ever made in his entire life. So the next day, Caden comes over, and during the day, they're playing games, they're watching horror movies, they're trying to kind of like amp themselves up for this Ouija board. They're trying to scare themselves before they play it, just to kind of make it more fun. They wait till his parents go to bed, and then they pull out the Ouija board and they start to play. Now they start asking basic questions like, what's your name? Where are you from? How old are you? But nothing is happening. Now they did this for a little while, and nothing happened. So they agree that this at this point is just a complete waste of time, and Caden puts it in his bag and they go to bed. Now Ryan goes to sleep and he wakes up sometime in the middle of the night, he's not sure what time it was, and he sees a woman standing at the other side of the bedroom. Only thing is she's standing in the exact same spot that they were playing the Ouija board. Now Ryan is a little bit confused at this point, and he kind of thinks that it's his mom coming to check on them, and for whatever reason he decides that he's going to pretend like he's asleep, and he's just kind of like peeking through his eyes like this. As he's laying there pretending that he's asleep, he sees her step forward. So she's now stepping closer to him, and now he can see her very clearly. It's not his mom. She has curly brown hair down to her hips, brown eyes, and she's really tan. This looks nothing like his mother. Now, he did say that she looked like a normal person. There wasn't anything like outwardly scary about her, but that it was scary that a random woman was just standing in his living room where they played the Ouija board, and it wasn't his mom checking on them. But it gets worse. So at this point, he tries to sit up because he wants to ask her who the hell she is and how the hell she got in his living room. So he goes to sit up and he realizes that he can't. He can't speak, he can't move, he can't sit up, he can't do anything. Now at this point, he has no idea what's going on because he had never experienced sleep paralysis before. So he is terrified, and he can still see Caden sleeping out of the corner of his eye. So as he is laying there internally freaking out, he starts to see her move closer. Now she is moving closer and closer, and then she gets on the bed and she starts crawling on the bed. Then she crawls directly on top of him, and her hair is now surrounding his face like a giant curtain. Then she lifts up her hand and she draws an X on his chest, but she does it 3 times. Then after she's done drawing the X's, she slowly retreats backwards by crawling backwards the same way that she crawled on the bed, except for she's just crawling backwards, and then she just disappears. And just like that, he can move again. The first thing he does is he wakes up Caden. Now Caden at first is a little bit annoyed that Ryan woke him up, but as soon as Ryan tells Caden exactly what this woman looked like and what he saw, Caden's face just goes white. Caden proceeds to tell him that he has these reoccurring dreams on a regular basis that he has never told anybody about because he didn't want anyone to think that he was crazy, of this woman that he's describing. Now Caden says that he has new dreams every night. It's not the same reoccurring dream, but every dream that he has, this woman is in that dream. As Caden is telling him all this, he's in shock, but he also reaches down his shirt and he feels his chest, and he feels something on his chest. So Ryan then lifts up his shirt and he sees 3 X's on his chest. Now Ryan says that he doesn't have a picture of this anymore, but he did say that this is exactly what it looked like. He said that that night, for the rest of the night, neither of them could go to sleep, that they were both absolutely terrified, so they stayed up for the rest of the night, and then they burned the board in secret because they didn't want to tell their parents at the time because their parents would have been extremely upset with them. He said he still has no clue to this day what this is. He tried searching up the girl and what she looked like, but he found absolutely nothing. He even tried searching up what the ex looked like, and he came up with absolutely nothing on that either. He said that he knows that this incident had everything to do with them playing with that Ouija board, and that he knows that they said goodbye, but there's no way that it didn't have anything to do with this Ouija board. She was standing in the same spot as the Ouija board. It was right after they played with the Ouija board, and that freaks him out. He also asked a question in his email, and he asked if when you have sleep paralysis, do you always see things? And the answer to that question is no. So I've only seen things a few times during sleep paralysis. I normally hear and feel things, but you don't always see things. Some people will see things every single time they have sleep paralysis, but not everybody does. Some people never see things, some people do. It's terrifying when you do, but just to let you know, at least this is the case for me. When I'm having sleep paralysis and I think I'm about to see something, or I start to see something, I'm actually able to close my eyes in the sleep paralysis. Another thing is your eyes aren't actually open when you're having sleep paralysis. You just think that they're open. So I'm not actually closing my eyes. I'm just like closing my eyes in that like state, if you will. But what do you guys think about that story? Do you think that this had anything to do with the Ouija board? Everything to do with the Ouija board? What do you think sleep paralysis is? Do you think that sleep paralysis is something that can be explained by science, or do you think it's paranormal? I think it's both, because it can be explained by science. It is when your body goes through a state of REM and your body paralyzes itself due to you not acting out your dreams, because that could be dangerous. And when you have sleep paralysis, you will wake up in the middle of that REM state, and your body will not send signals yet to, or your mind will not send signals yet to the rest of your body to unparalyze itself. So your body thinks you're asleep still, but your mind is not. And people start to hallucinate, or in my opinion, I don't think it's hallucinating, but that's just my personal opinion. I'm not trying to push my beliefs on anybody, but for anybody who doesn't know how sleep paralysis works, that's how it works, at least in the scientific aspect of things. But drop all thoughts, opinions, and suggestions below in the comments. As always, please be respectful.
Let's talk about the Hat Man. You get scared easily, now is your time to scroll, because the amount of emails that I get about this specific entity is kind of alarming. I know that he is, or it is, so prevalent in paranormal culture. It has regularly been seen by a ton of people. Every time I read a story about this entity, it just freaks me out so bad, because I remember when my sister came into my room and was describing this thing that she had seen while astral projected, and I'm almost certain that it was this same person or entity or whatever you want to call it. The person who sent me this email did not specify whether or not they wanted to remain anonymous, so for obvious reasons I'm going to keep them anonymous and use the name Jamie for the story's sake. So Jamie says that this happened while she was 8 years old, and the scariest part of the story is that it happened in broad daylight. Jamie was home alone while her mom and sister were grocery shopping and her father was at work. Her mother had told her before leaving to go grocery shopping to vacuum the guest room. So she gets the vacuum out, she goes to the guest room, obviously vacuums it, goes to put the vacuum away in the laundry room, turns around, and at the end of the hallway, she sees this tall black figure, a top hat. Freaks out, runs into the guest room, shuts the door, and waits for her parents to get home. He wasn't there when they did get home, and she never saw him again after being in that house. If I'm being completely honest, that is the reason why I sleep with a nightlight. I wish I was joking. I have always slept with like a light on, and it's because I'm so scared of getting sleep paralysis to the point where I'm like seeing things. I need to know if y'all have had experiences seeing this same entity, because seriously, if I tallied up every single Hatman story that I get, I would have like hundreds. I think it ranges sometimes where if you see him with a top hat, if you don't see him with a top hat, if you see him with glowing red eyes, if he doesn't have glowing red eyes, it's just variable. Your experiences in the comments down below. That's gonna do it for me. Stay tuned for more ghost stories.
If you believe in the paranormal, I want to hear what got you there. This story came from someone we'll call Lyle, because he says he's an airline pilot and doesn't need anyone reporting him to the FAA for telling this story. He says, I know it sounds crazy, and I have always been a firm believer that if I can see it, I can touch it, until this happened. In September of 2023, he and his family purchased a house in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. At the time, the house was a dream come true. It was everything the family was looking for, and they were very excited to move in. But that dream did not last for long, because very soon after they moved in, his daughter came into their room one night and she said, Mommy, Daddy, I'm having nightmares. And they thought just because they had just moved into a new place that it was just her imagination running wild. But wanting to comfort her, they let her sleep with them. But the nightmares continued, and she was in their bed every single night. But Lyle says that as a girl dad, he thought that this was just something she was using in a way to manipulate them in order to sleep in their bed, until he started seeing shadow figures walk by her bedroom window at night, sometimes when he would be in there checking on her after she had gone to bed. But the thing was, her bedroom was about 15 feet off the ground. The shadow figure or figures seemed human in shape, but it was always out of the corner of his eye. It was never when he was looking directly at the window. So he just thought it was his mind playing tricks on him, or maybe a trick of the light outside, because he knew that logically there was no one walking by her window outside at night. It was impossible. But then one evening, he and his wife got home and they noticed the door to their house was wide open, and they knew that they had closed it behind them when they left. So he went in, he cleared the house, his wife came in, and nothing was out of place except the door to their daughter's bedroom was wide open. He says they always keep their bedroom doors closed to prevent the air or the heat from running too hard. But he didn't want to say anything to his wife because he didn't want her to panic, and nothing was out of place. But then his wife became startled because occasionally when she would be home alone, she would complain of their daughter's toys turning on in the other room and talking to her when she was nowhere near them. But then on April 15th, 2024, he says he became a firm believer in the paranormal. It started as an ordinary night. He was watching TV downstairs with his daughter, and his daughter fell asleep on his chest. He got up, turned off the TV, and carried his daughter to her own bedroom where he put her in her bed, and then he went to bed. And then he says at 3:02 a.m., he remembers because he looked at the clock, he sat up, awake from a dead sleep, like he had been awake the whole time, and he heard his daughter talking to someone. It was low, like a whisper, so he looks over at his wife, and she's sound asleep, and the daughter's not in the room. So as a dad, he's thinking, there is someone in my child's room right now. So he grabs an item from his nightstand to protect the family, and he barges in his daughter's room. She doesn't turn to look at him when she comes in, but he sees her sitting up in her bed, talking to the corner of her room, and she's whispering something, like she's giving an answer, and then she's waiting for a reply, and then she says something again. And so he says, "Who are you talking to, baby?" She ignores him and continues whispering to whoever she was seeing in the corner of her room. He asks her 2 more times. She ignores him those times as well, but then the 4th time he asks her, she whips her head around and she kind of cocks it to the side. He says, like you see in a horror movie, and not whispering anymore, but kind of angrily, she says, "My friends." And he says at that point, he moved across the room with a speed that surprised even him. And he grabbed her and he says, "I know this doesn't really make sense, but at the moment that I grabbed her, my daughter came back." He says, "I brought her back to our bedroom, and I'm not a religious person, but I began to pray over her." And he says his wife was awake at that point. She had apparently heard him in their daughter's room asking who she was talking to. And he says that his wife is religious. And so she got up and she grabbed anointing oil. She began anointing the home, and then she looked at Lyle and told him to open the back door. And then she said, and he says he'll never forget this, he wrote this in all capitals, "Your feet will burn in this house. You will never touch my child again. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Get out now." And Lyle says he felt a rush of wind move past him. He said it was such a distinct feeling that it felt as if an actual person had moved past him out the door. And when that happened, his wife looked at him and said, "Okay, close the door, it's gone." The speed at which she said it seemed to surprise him as well, because he said that it was almost as if she could see it. But then they all went back to bed. And in the morning, his daughter said she didn't remember talking to anyone, but that was the last night that his daughter ever complained of having a nightmare or asked to sleep in their bed. But Lyle says that some nights he still catches himself standing in her doorway, watching over her and thinking about the night that something tried to possess his daughter. He said he also truly believes that it tried to come back a few months later, but that would be a whole other story. So if you all want that, let me know and I can reach out to him for that second part as well. But he says if he hadn't been there to experience it, he wouldn't believe it either, and it feels good to finally get off his chest. This is Spooky Scary Storytime, the series of allegedly true listener-submitted stories about the creepiest and most unsettling things that they've ever encountered. If you have a story you think no one else would believe, please send it in. We would love to hear it.
This was taken at the George Flavel House in Astoria, Oregon. The year is unknown, but the person who took the photo was on a tour of the historic home. She claims there was absolutely nobody in the room when she took this photo. This was taken by an overnight security guard working at a plaza in Puebla, Mexico. According to him, while he was making his rounds and making sure that everything was locked up, he kept hearing noises coming from above him. He started taking flash photos to see if there was some kind of mechanical issue causing the noise. But what he captured was a lot worse. Upon searching the entire plaza afterward, the figure in the photo was nowhere to be found. The owner of the photo said that they were just taking a normal selfie during a fun night out and absolutely no one was standing behind them. They only noticed the creepy extra guest after looking at their pictures the next day. They swear that there was absolutely nothing reflective behind them at all. This photo was taken in a hospital bathroom in Monterrey, Mexico. This specific wing of the hospital was already closed off since it was 1 a.m. I was the only person in the bathroom when I heard noises and saw this reflecting off of the wall. I don't know what it is, but when I turned the corner, there was nothing physically there.
This woman and her mother survived a violent car accident, but afterwards, they realized that they remembered a completely different crash. This one was sent in from someone in New Zealand. By the way, if you have a story that you'd like to share with our glitch community about glitches in the Matrix, dreams, aliens, cryptids, or the paranormal, you can send it to this email address, and remember, we believe you. On March 2nd, 2026, I was planning to spend the day with my mom, who I was on call with. I was about to leave my house to catch the bus to hers, but mom suddenly said that she will come pick me up and told me that she will be at mine in 10 minutes. Mom pulled up and I got into the car and put my seatbelt on, and we started driving to her place. We were stopped at lights on a main road, and as our light went green, we drove off. We reached 30 kilometers at this point. I don't know what that means. Hold on. Okay, she said that's like 18.6 miles an hour, so that's really not fast at all. Okay, so we were driving, reached 30 kilometers per hour at this point, and then a split second, there was a black car coming straight towards us from the left intersection, about to collide with us. I saw a white van coming towards us as well, as if we were pushed over to the oncoming traffic. I remember everything went blurry and I felt the impact, but I also saw it as if I was from above. I don't know how to explain it. Then I remembered saying to my mom, "Are you okay?" And then took my seatbelt off and jumped out of the car. I had my phone in my hand and managed to get a 5-second video. When I finished my video, I was holding my chest, yelling out to everyone that was around to ring the ambulance, and there was a lot of traffic at the time, so there were plenty of people around, but nobody was responding to me, or it seemed like nobody could see me. I remember walking to sit on the footpath, and all of a sudden, I was in an ambulance with the paramedics, who said I was okay and sent me on my merry way. Everything felt weird, but I thought it was just from shock. Now, from my mom's perspective. As we approached the red light, my mom said that she already saw what was going to happen as she spotted the black car at the intersection and the white van on the other side. As the light went green, she drove off knowing what was coming, so she saw the black car coming our way, and all she could think about was saving me. So as the impact happened, she had turned and pulled the handbrake, hoping the car didn't T-bone me. She remembers being jolted back into her body, and then the next thing she remembers was being approached by a paramedic and then watching the paramedic walk away slowly and then fade away. What? Then we were at her house in shock, trying to comprehend what had just happened. I remember just feeling intense heartbreak for my daughter, whose school we had just crashed outside of. I felt immense sadness because my life just flashed before my eyes, and I feel like I was supposed to die, but I didn't, and I was alive. I cried, and I felt this heartbreak for 2 days, and I didn't know why. I think it's so interesting that you're feeling heartbreak at the fact that you made it. You know what I mean? Like you're feeling heartbreak? Do you just mean that you felt sad or just having feelings? Or I think it's so interesting that you're feeling like heartbreak for being alive. Now, we've seen pictures of our crash that was posted on social media, but the scene I was looking at was not the scene that I remember. I was looking at a fire truck, the black car, and a white van, but our blue car was nowhere. How? I then saw another picture from another perspective, and boom, there was the fire truck, the black car, and our blue car, but this time no white van? Also, the police said to me and mom that we were in a head-on collision, but we both tried to tell him, no, we were hit from oncoming on the left side of us coming from the intersection. But looking at the damage of our car, it doesn't look like a sideswipe. It looks like a collision. Now, another thing is I had looked at a 5-second video that I'd done right after the impact, and I took some pictures. Now, bear in mind, I walked away from this crash with not even one bruise or scratch anywhere on my body. But in this video and photos I got from screenshotting the video, there was visible black eyes and hole and cuts and gashes on my face, yet physically they weren't there. There's also a picture where my eyes looked black, but my eyeball isn't there. I can't explain it. Anyway, I've come to the conclusion that on the morning and at the time of the crash, I was supposed to die. That was my death date, and that's how I was going to exit. Now, because my mom's motherly instinct kicked in, she says that she had grabbed me at the time of impact and had threw me into a timeline where I survived that crash. And that kind of explains why I'm seeing all the injuries on my face in the video and pictures, because my phone caught the side of me in the timeline where I didn't survive. It also explains why no one was responding to me as I was holding my chest and yelling out for someone to call the ambulance. It's like I wasn't there. Also, I think the immense heartbreak I was feeling for my daughter was the pain that she was suffering in the timeline that I had died in. Oh my God, I didn't even think of that. I have chills. Also, I forgot to mention that when my mom finally did get out of the vehicle, she could see all the injuries that I had gotten from the crash because she was telling me I had black eyes and stuff. But the next day, we both seen that I was okay and didn't have no injuries, and we've been confused ever since. since. Can I get some opinions on this, please? I feel lost right now. The end. Holy freaking smokes, dude. What I think is interesting is that so you get in this crash and then you're able to like get out of the car, take a video, then you're calling out for people to help you, and then you're gone and you're in another timeline. And I think that's interesting because I feel like if you were physically able to like get out of the car and take a video and ask for help, then you wouldn't be about to die. Unless like another car came and like hit you while you were standing out of the car or something, or unless like you were just in shock, which is why you were able to get out of the car and take the video even though you were in such bad shape. But it absolutely, like, I don't see any other thing that this is besides the fact that you definitely died. This is definitely a quantum immortality event. You died and you switched over to another timeline in which you didn't die. But the weird thing is about that is that you still had the video and like the pictures, screenshots that you took from the video, you still had that from the other timeline. That's what's crazy to me. When there's like a timeline switch, but then like something from the old timeline is still there. I know a lot of time there's a timeline switch and memories from the old timeline are there and people are confused. And this is why we have these stories in general. If you didn't even realize, obviously, then there would be no stories to tell. But the fact when something like physically is there, like physical evidence or something from the previous timeline, I think that's pretty crazy. Like, why would you switch into a timeline where you didn't die, but you still have videos from the timeline in which you did? You know what I mean? Like, some shit is fucked up and it's not working right. And that makes so much sense about the fact that you felt so much heartbreak because you probably felt that for your daughter in the other timeline who lost her mom. Oh my God. That's what I think, at least. I think that's pretty a black and white thing. I think you literally died and you switched into another timeline. I just can't believe that you still have the video. What do you guys think? Can you think it could be anything else, or we think it's quantum immortality? Please let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for sharing your story.
I started having worms coming out of my private part, and the person who did it to me was someone very close to me. Please keep me anonymous. Let's call me Deborah, but that is not my real name. I had a best friend who was more like a sister to me. We had known each other since we were very young. There was almost nothing about my life that she didn't know. We grew up together. We went through school together. We shared our problems, our secrets, our plans, and even our silly dreams. I remember one particular conversation we used to have when we were very young. We would sit together and talk about the kind of lives we wanted for ourselves, and we promised that when we eventually got married and had children, we would name our first children after each other. Silly plans. That was how close we were. At some point, she was the only friend I really had. My parents were no longer alive, so she became one of the people I depended on emotionally. Whenever something happened in my life, she was the first person I called. When I met my husband, I told her everything. My husband was a very wealthy man, and honestly, when I first met him, I didn't want to marry him. I had always heard stories about wealthy men being proud, rude, and difficult to live with, so I was scared. But my husband was different. He was very humble. He treated people well. He wasn't the type of rich man who wanted everyone to know he had money. That was what actually attracted me to him. Eventually, I agreed to marry him, and because my best friend was practically my sister, I introduced her to my husband. She became comfortable around him very quickly. At first, I did not see anything wrong with it. In fact, I was happy. I thought my husband and my best friend got along. What more could I ask for? But after some time, my friend started making comments about my husband. She would say things like, "Are you sure this man is really as good as you think?" Sometimes she would joke that maybe my husband was only behaving well because he didn't want me to suspect that he was seeing another woman. I would laugh it off. I would tell her that she was overthinking things. I trusted my husband completely, and I also trusted her. So whenever she said things like that, I never took them seriously. I didn't know that those little comments would rather mean something completely different to me. Then one day, I noticed that some of my things were missing from my bedroom. It was nothing major. My makeup brush was gone. Then I couldn't find one of my lip glosses. I searched everywhere but couldn't find them. A few days later, my friend came to visit me. At some point, she went towards my bedroom. I asked her where she was going, and she told me she wanted to use my bathroom. There was actually a bathroom for visitors, but she laughed and said, "Are we not like sisters?" So I didn't think anything of it. I allowed her to go. I had no reason to suspect her. Not long after that, my husband came home one evening and said he couldn't find one of his shirts. We searched the wardrobe, we checked the laundry, we checked everywhere we could think of. The shirt was nowhere to be found. At that time, none of us understood what was happening. I certainly did not know that the things disappearing from my house were not disappearing by themselves. Months passed. Then my marriage started changing. My husband began complaining that I was becoming too sexually active. I always wanted him around me. I always wanted him to touch me and spend time with me. At first, I didn't understand why it was becoming a problem. But eventually, it started draining him. He became tired. He started coming home late too. Sometimes he wouldn't come home early at all. And naturally, this started causing problems between us. I thought maybe we were just going through a difficult period in our marriage. Then something else happened, Rami. My best friend started becoming distant from me. The same person who used to call me every day suddenly became difficult to reach. She stopped checking up on me on WhatsApp the way she used to. And because I was already having problems in my marriage, I noticed it, but I still didn't think she could ever be the reason for what was happening. Then my body started changing too. At first, I noticed strange things coming from my private part. It was the green water. I had never experienced anything like that before. Then the smell became very bad. It became foul. I started getting scared. And after some time, I started noticing tiny things moving in it. It was small worms. I was very terrified. I couldn't understand what was happening to me. But because I came from a very spiritual family, something inside me kept telling me that this wasn't just a normal physical problem.
Full story is on my YouTube channel. Click the link in my bio to watch. Use this thumbnail. Thank you.
My mother played with a Ouija board and opened up a portal. You guys need to see the cute earrings that my husband picked out for me because you can't really see them in my ears. So this girl wants to share a story that happened in her family even before she was born but continues to affect them till this day. Her name is Elizabeth, and again, this happened way before she was even born. She explains that her mom lived in an apartment, but this apartment was surrounded by her family members, so they all lived in like different units but at the same building. So the story that was told to her when she was a teenager was that her mom played the Ouija board with a lot of her other friends. After they played with the Ouija board, really strange and weird things happened in that apartment building. In the beginning, it was just like the lights would flicker or they would go out and come back. They would hear strange sounds in empty rooms, or they would leave objects in one spot and find it in a completely different spot altogether. With time, things got a lot worse, and that is because her mom started to feel bad. There were occasions where her mom just like at a snap of a finger would change her behavior completely. Because of this, they took her mom to like curanderos, or people who can cleanse her from whatever was happening. All of these people agreed that there was one thing that she did, and it was that she played with the Ouija board and brought something in to live with her. This girl says that she was able to see her mom's behavior and live with it for a very long time. She really loved her mom and cared for her a lot, but in the same note, she was terrified of her mom. There are moments where her mom would get really aggressive, and it just felt like it came out of nowhere. It was like unprovoked. And even with all that, she did learn how to live with her mom mom, even though she was scared and even though she knew that she felt something else in the house with them. There was a lot of things that happened in the apartment that were so hard to explain because she could visibly see when things would move by themselves. She remembers there was also a fire that started right in front of her with no explanation or no reason as to why it should have caught fire. But one of the strangest things had to do with a very specific movie, The Exorcist. Anytime somebody would put The Exorcist movie is when all of the problems in that apartment building would start. Why the fuck would y'all be watching The Exorcist with all this shit happening? What the hell? I'm sorry, but if my mom had strange behaviors, you would think I'm gonna pop in The Exorcist movie and be like, oh yeah, this is a good one. No! She says that anytime anybody would try to watch The Exorcist in that house, the lights would completely shut off or some sort of electronic would stop working. I just needed that to happen one time to me to never play that movie again. The other thing that would happen is that their pets were the ones who would suffer the most. Baby, stop getting pets. Let me tell you the list of animals that she said that ended up after some time. A fish, a dog, a hamster. They already give themselves the wildest deaths on their own, but you brought them into this house. Every single time they would play the Exorcist movie, they knew that one of their pets was gonna pass away. Why would you play it knowing that your pet was gonna go, you know? Okay, she said that it got to a point where they would avoid watching the movie because of this. At the very least, okay? At the very least, that should have happened at least 2 times, you know? One time, maybe a coincidence. Twice? I hope it was just like at least twice where you guys were like, oh, let's stop watching it because a pet is gonna die. After this, the mom went to a person to get some help and she went to a card reader. That is where this card reader told her something very specific. She assured her that she was gonna have 3 children and that she was gonna pass away when she was 36 years old. Both of those things ended up happening. She explains that after her mom ended up passing away, they carried on with their lives and moved out of the apartment building, leaving everything behind. However, there was something that didn't go away completely, and it was because her and her siblings would from time to time have dreams about this apartment building. She explains that in her dreams, it was almost like if this apartment was calling to her. She would go there and she would be walking through the hallways like if somebody wanted her there. She still had family members that lived in that apartment building, and sometimes when she wouldn't go there, she felt like there was a need to go there, like something was calling her there, even when she was awake, not just when she was dreaming. And that when she would go and finally leave again, that feeling like of her wanting to be there would go away for a little while until it came back again, and she basically felt like she needed to go visit this place. She doesn't know if in that apartment maybe there really was a portal opened when they played the Ouija board a long time ago, or if there is just something else there calling to them. She doesn't understand what happened, and now she has no family members that lived there. The last people who moved away are now saying that they also are having dreams of this apartment, and not only just like dreams, but sometimes they have nightmares that they're in there and things are happening. She honestly says that she shares this story to anybody that she can because she wants them to know the importance of not playing with something that you have no idea could cause chaos. And the chaos doesn't just happen to the person playing, but everybody who is around that can be affected. But what do you guys think?
This man managed one of America's oldest family fortunes for 40 years, claims that some of his clients weren't entirely human, and according to him, the condition has been hiding in their bloodline since the Mayflower. So this story was sent to me by a retired financial consultant who I'm gonna call Arthur. And I have no way of verifying any of his claims, and he asked me to change several identifying details, including the family's name and his name, so take this as entertainment, and you guys can decide as always. But Arthur said there was one reason he waited until now to tell anyone, or me, and then me you. So the last person who threatened to reveal this family's secret apparently disappeared back in 1992. Arthur began working for this family in the early 1980s, and they lived on a secluded estate up in Massachusetts. And according to the family records, their ancestors had arrived in America aboard the Mayflower. And they weren't extraordinarily out there in the public, but they were very wealthy, not flashy. The money was divided between old trust, land, private investments, and companies that had been operating under different names for generations. Arthur's job was to manage their finances very discreetly. So for nearly a decade, they treated him better than any employer that he'd ever had before that. They paid him extremely well. They invited him to family dinners. They remembered his kids' birthdays, and they even covered part of his wife's medical expenses once their insurance refused to pay anymore. So Arthur genuinely loved them, and he was very grateful, but there were certain things about them. Like, certain members of the family were almost never photographed. Some avoided daytime meetings and insisted that the curtains remain closed always. The oldest relatives would disappear for weeks during the winter, yet Arthur was instructed to continue paying enormous grocery and heating bills at a second property that was near the coast. There were always rooms, at the maid house that he was forbidden to enter. Arthur never questioned any of it, though. Wealthy families valued their privacy, and maintaining that privacy was part of what he was being paid for. Well, in November of 1991, the family patriarch summoned him to the estate shortly after midnight. Arthur immediately knew that something was wrong because he just left there about an hour or two prior, leaving work. And when he had arrived, every light in the house was off except for a lamp inside of the patriarch's library. And he was waiting beside the fireplace with his eldest daughter and another family member who was a family physician that Arthur had met once before. Now, the old man locked the door, and he asked Arthur whether he considered himself loyal to the family. Of course, Arthur said yes. Then the patriarch placed a folder on the table, and inside were handwritten birth records stretching back hundreds of years. And beside them, or certain names, there was a small green circle around them. So Arthur assumed that maybe the markings represented a hereditary illness, and the patriarch told him that was almost correct. He explained that sometime before the family crossed the Atlantic, something had entered their bloodline. And he didn't call it a curse or a disease. He described it as a recessive genetic inheritance, one that only appeared when two patriarchal branches of the family produced a child. Most family members were completely ordinary, but every few generations, one was born different. And when Arthur asked what different meant, the patriarch just looked toward the physician and he was like, "Show him." So the doctor opened up a leather medical case and removed several x-rays. And the first appeared to show a human skull, but the jaw contained a second row of small teeth that was folded behind the first. And another image showed an unusual rib cage and a very long structure compressed near the base of the spine. So Arthur then noticed that the eldest daughter standing beside the fireplace, right? She was staring directly into the flames without blinking. And the patriarch quietly said her name, and when she turned toward Arthur, a thin, cloudy membrane moved sideways across both of her eyes, like how we blink this way or like a reptile blinks that way. Not downward like an eyelid, right? Sideways. And Arthur said he stumbled backward and he struck the bookshelf out of shock. The daughter didn't move toward him. She only just watched him with that same calm expression that she was looking at the fire with. Then the skin beneath her jaw began to pulse, he said. And for several seconds, the outline of her face appeared to shift a little. Her cheekbones widened and the corners of her mouth stretched really far back, more than normal. And something beneath the skin of her throat opened and closed like a pair of gills. And Arthur said that the worst part was the sound that it made. And in my mind, it made me think of Jeepers Creepers' nose. Well, it was like a wet clicking sound, he said, like fingernails tapping, beneath a floorboard. And everything else appeared kind of normal but that. And the patriarch explained that his daughter was one of 4 living family members who carried this active trait. They could pass as human most of the time, but extreme heat, stress, or hunger made maintaining their true appearance a little bit more difficult. And Arthur asked why they were telling him, and the old man said that the family's finances had become a little complicated, and certain trusts were designed merely to preserve their wealth. And they funded private physicians, specialized food shipments, and isolated properties where the affected relatives could live without being seen or without having a slip-up. And Arthur had unknowingly managed those accounts for years. Now they needed him to do it more knowingly, and he was offered enough money to retire immediately, but leaving would require signing some documents that contained a disturbing clause. And it was, if he ever revealed anything that he had seen, the family would, retain the right to protect their lineage at all costs, no matter what. Arthur, of course, signed. And he continued working for them for nearly 30 years after that. And during that time, he witnessed only a few other things that he really couldn't explain. Security footage would show family members what would look like they're glitching on camera in like the basement, or, refrigerated deliveries marked as livestock arriving without any records of animals being purchased. And once during a meeting, he watched an elderly woman, what he thought shed a transparent layer of skin on her hand, and she just calmly picked it up and put it back inside of her purse. But Arthur insisted that they were never cruel to him, and in fact, when his wife was diagnosed with stage 4 bone cancer, the family offered to pay for the entire treatment up front, no questions asked. Arthur thanked them, but resigned, and he wanted whatever time he did have left with his wife to be spent with her. And at his final meeting, the family's patriarch, their grandson, embraced him, and they said, "You protected us longer than most of our own blood ever could." And before Arthur left, the man handed him an envelope containing a handwritten list of every family member carrying the active gene. And Arthur claimed several of those names now belong to people working in high finance positions, medicine, even certain governments all over the world. But he did tell me something that is interesting, and that's Arthur's wife passed away several months ago. And on the evening of her funeral, he returned home and found a bowl of white flowers sitting on his kitchen table. And there was no sign or any forced entry or anything like that. And beside the flowers was a card bearing the family's crest, and it simply just said, "We are so sorry for your loss. You are still one of us, and you will always be a member of the family." Arthur immediately called the family's old number, but it had been disconnected at this point. And while he was standing in the kitchen, he heard that familiar clicking sound coming from the hallway behind him by his bedroom. And he didn't turn around, he just let it go, but he swears he heard someone speaking to him telepathically, and they just said, "Thank you so much for keeping our secret." So, Arthur stood there completely still, and when he heard the back door finally close, he turned and there was no one there. But Arthur says that this is why he finally told his side of the story, because after serving that family for 40 years, he believes that their final visit wasn't meant to threaten him. It was meant to remind him that even though he had resigned, they had never truly let him go as a member of the family. So this video isn't meant to, his big thing was to not make people think that all these types of people are evil. On the contrary, from his experience, they treated him great. So let me know what you guys think in the comments.
I found a note in my room that I didn't write. Last night I came home around 11 p.m. Everything was normal. My parents were downstairs, my room was exactly how I left it, and my window was locked. Then I noticed a piece of paper on my desk. It said, "Whatever you do, don't look under your bed tonight." I thought my friends were messing with me. I checked under the bed anyway. Nothing. I laughed, threw the note away, and went to sleep. At 3:17 a.m., I woke up because I heard something scratching underneath me. I froze. Then I remembered the note. I slowly reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. There was nothing under the bed, but when I looked at my desk, there was another note. This one said, "I told you not to look." I grabbed my phone and ran downstairs. My parents were still asleep. I woke my dad up and showed him the notes. He stared at them for a few seconds. Then he asked me, "Where did you get these?" I told him they were on my desk. He went completely silent. Then he opened an old drawer and pulled out a photograph. It was a picture of me standing in my bedroom. The picture was taken from underneath my bed. The date on the back was tomorrow.
Want to hear a scary story? I grew up in Appalachia for 27 years. This is how my childhood was. The first experience I ever had that I can remember, I was 4 years old. And we were going to leave early in the morning for a family vacation. My first vacation I was ever going to be on. Now, we lived out in the middle of absolute nowhere in Jackson County, Tennessee, at the base of the Appalachian Mountains. We had left when it was still dark outside, and we were heading down the hill. And before we had made it out of the holler, we actually had to stop because there was a dark horse that was standing right in the middle of the road, square in the middle of the headlights. Now, I remember I was asleep in the back seat, and my parents actually woke me up from tapping the brakes. And I look, and I remember seeing this horse, and I remember my parents talking about it, like how strange it was, wondering if it was one of our horses, but it was about a mile away from home. And then a man out of nowhere walks up and grabs the horse by the reins, and then he walks away with it. Now, if you want to know how this road was, it was a mountain on one side, like a sheer, too steep to walk up mountain. And on the other side, it was way too steep to go down. We have no idea where this man went, but he did not pass our vehicle. Not only that, he had no light source. To this day, we have no good explanation for it, but my parents talked about it so much on the way to this destination. As I got older, I looked up, and there's actually a lot of stories of the dark horses in that area. Now, this man, I remember in my head him being white, so I don't think it was anything Native American related, even though that area had tons of Native American leftover landmarks and cultural findings. National Geographic actually came out and excavated like right behind our family home. Trailer, I should say. We weren't that high class yet. The next thing, this is also between the ages of 4 and 5. I used to go fishing at the pond that was directly in front of our trailer. Now, once again, if you guys don't really know how homes in Appalachian Mountains work, you mostly live in almost like compound communities. So everybody on this hill was actually members of my family. So my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, we all lived on this road that my grandpa originally made with a bulldozer. And it was actually named after him. It's called Billbuck Lane. So when I was a child, I ran free because I had people that could watch me out of any window. I mean, everybody was either a cousin or an uncle or a grandparent within a couple miles of us. So I used to fish at this pond, and my parents could see me from the window, or my mom, when she was out in the yard, could see me. And I could swim really good as a child. Anybody in the Appalachian area can. So there's no risk of me drowning. And I would go down there and I would spend hours by myself fishing with worms I had dug up from the ground. It's my favorite thing to do. And I used to tell my cousin about the man that would watch me fish and make sure that I was safe. I actually have no recollection of this whatsoever, besides just the faint memory of there being somebody there when I fished most of the time. And my cousin Danny, he was older than me, and he actually would tell me that that was the wild man, or what I now know as Bigfoot, that roamed in this hillside. My uncle would tell me so many stories of his encounters with this wild man, this Bigfoot out there. These hoops and hollers and these yelps that he would hear all the time. It is stuck with our family so much, and it's so common in our family to know that in this area, that we just call them wild men. We steer clear of them. We avoid them. If we think we're hearing them, we don't make a scene about it and call back or make a big ruckus or, go post about it and tell everybody go looking for this thing. It's been about 10 years since I've heard any of my family talk about wild men. Now, this guy never talked to me when I was a kid, apparently, is what I would tell my cousin, that he would just watch me from the bushes and watch me from the tree line. And the only faint remembrance that I can have of it is I do remember a head peeking out from behind of a tree while I was fishing, and it used to make me feel comfortable knowing that somebody was watching me fish. As an adult telling that story, I'm going to move a little bit closer to my light. Now, between the ages of 5 and 6, I had one big happening that sticks with me really heavy. And the reason I can remember I was between 5 and 6 exactly is because we did move away from that compound family home to a actual brick house in the city. And this was still in Tennessee. It's actually the Cookeville area. And I remember having a racetrack that I could put together. If you guys remember those magnetic racetracks where the cars would go really fast on the little magnet tracks, and you had the little controllers for them. I remember I used to put this thing together all the time, and it was so complicated and hard to put together, at least for my 5 to 6 year old brain. And we only lived in this house for a year. That's how I know exactly how old I was. And I remember putting this racetrack together, and it had these little yellow guardrails that went around the outside of it, and they just clipped into the side of the track. And I remember my box was behind me, and I was reaching back and grabbing the pieces and just putting it together. And I remember I looked back behind me to get a piece out of this box. So I looked back, and one of those yellow guardrails was about 8 to 10 inches off the ground, and it seemed to just be suspended there, like it was floating. And I remember just freezing. Right now in my head, I can see it so clear. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't like some kind of screen memory fake thing. It was. I used to play a lot as a child, like alone a lot as a child. You'll hear that in my stories. I was what's known as a latchkey kid. A lot of us 90s kids were. And I remember looking around, and it was like I was so scared I couldn't get any words out. And I knew my mom was in the kitchen and my dad was at work. And I remember I jumped up and I just screamed, and I ran and told my mom in the kitchen. She was talking on the phone, and she really kind of sorry, Mom, but you brushed me off. And I would too, if a little kid told me that, overactive imagination or whatever. I used to love scary stuff my whole life. But I can remember that, in my head, I can see this clear as day. And what was weird about that is at that time in my life, because I moved away from all my family that I ever had and my friends, I used to make, and I played a lot alone, I used to make up an imaginary friend. And I remember the imaginary friend that I had, he wasn't a Easter Bunny like costume type deal, like not man in a costume, but I remember my imaginary friend looking like a rabbit that was wearing like overalls, but he was like a half man, half rabbit wearing overalls. I remember that, like clear as day, I can see that imaginary friend in my head. And for whatever reason, after that, I never wanted to imagine this imaginary friend ever again. Like I never wanted to have anything to do with this imaginary friend, because I think I did something called a topa. If you've never heard of that, a topa is when you imagine something so hard it becomes real. You guys might have seen that movie Imaginary a few years ago, and that's kind of what it felt like. And I didn't know this as a kid. I just remember thinking like, I don't want him to come play anymore. Like I don't want him to come play anymore. And that's actually really sad that I'm thinking about it, that I made him up because I moved away from my family and like everybody I ever knew. Not everything was ghosts and goblins though, and Bigfoot. There were some very real things in the Appalachian Mountains that happened. It was kind of dark. I saw my first dead body when I was like 7 years old. So from somebody who'd been murdered, not just a dead body at a funeral. So me and my cousin Cody, we used to play together every weekend because I did get taken back to that family like compound type area, that holler every weekend of my life until I was 18. And it was by choice. I wanted to go back there. And so I would stay with my grandparents on Friday night, and I wouldn't come back until like Sunday afternoon. And those are those are my best memories of my entire life, is growing up in the hills of Jackson County, Tennessee, surrounded by my cousins and my family. Cody and Danny, if you're watching this, I freaking love you. Katie, love you. You know, Luke, Kyle, obviously love you guys. It was a magical childhood. It really was. But something in those woods calls in like a darkness to it. And there is no areas up there that are void of these kind of stories I'm about to tell next, that are dark, real humans, which are the realest monsters that are out there. So me and Cody were sitting on the porch, and we noticed that Opal, our neighbor that lived down the hill, and he was like a distant cousin of ours, and he was on his laying on his front porch, and the way the hill was shaped, he was a little bit higher than us, so we could just see like his feet hanging off the porch. So we decided to go up to Cody's house and get some binoculars so we could see better. And we remember looking at him, and it looked like he was taking a nap on his front porch. And we're just like looking like, man, Opal's napping at 11 a.m. You know, he's hitting the bottle early, which he didn't drink. Family that knows Opal, I'm sorry. And all of a sudden, a helicopter comes down out of the sky. And there's FBI cars pulling in. Like, I'd never seen this. Like, this is in the middle of nowhere. A helicopter lands in my grandpa's cow field. Remember, it scared the hell out of the cows. Scared us. And we're like watching, we're like, oh my, this is Red Dawn. Like I'd watched Red Dawn before, and I was like, these are the Russians, we're dying, you know, but it was just the feds. And they stormed that trailer house of theirs. And essentially Opal and his brother had a giant grow farm, like way back in the woods. And underneath their trailer, just like that one country song, they had stashes and stashes of cash and weed and hash and everything else, like all the stuff. And that morning, I guess they knew that the feds were onto them, and his brother actually shot him dead on the porch, and ran off with all the money. And they did catch up to him. They caught him. He was on his way to Mexico. And that was just a weird, wild time. And I remember like that stuck with me for a while, because like that was right next to the pond I used to fish at every day that I was telling you about earlier. That pond was actually in between their house and my house. And it's just, you never really know anybody. You never really know who people are, you know. That one got dark, and this next one's going to get a little darker. So fast forward maybe a couple years, and this is the one that bothered me more than anything that's ever happened to me in almost in my entire life. There was a recent, I'm not going to get into that happened recently, but anyhow, that was on the news and stuff. Like, so when fast forward a couple years, I'm spending the night at my cousin Danny's house. And me and Danny loved anything spooky. Like I said, those woods, there's something in those woods that just call to you to want to be scared and to look up horrid things, and just, there's just something magical about it. And I can't describe it unless you're there. You don't know what I'm talking about. Like, it's like if you listen closely, you can hear the woods talking to you. So we used to love to go out in the woods at night and get each other scared and tell, you know, creepy stories like I'm doing right now. And That's where my love of this actually began, is my cousin Danny scaring the absolute living daylights out of me. And I'll spend the night at his house, and like I did a lot of times. And you know, and that was the cool thing about growing up in this family compound, is we never really knew where we were going to end up that night, because like we might spend the night at Maul's house, we might spend the night at Danny's house, we might spend the night at Cody's house. Like, you know, we didn't know where we were going to end up. You know, we just ride our bikes everywhere and just be wild kids. You know, it was great. But sometimes there's people in the woods watching you be wild kids, and they know that you might be a little left unattended, because we'd spend the night at his house. We had watched a scary movie just like every other night. And that's why no one believed me at first until they caught him. Is I'm asleep in his bed, and I was against the wall, which is next to the window. And in these country homes at nighttime, a lot of times you don't sleep with the air conditioning on. You just raise the windows, so there would be nothing but a screen separating you and outside. If you know Appalachia rules, it's actually kind of a big no-no not to have the curtains drawn, because you're never supposed to be looking outside in the dark through the windows. Because like I said, things that look out also look in. And I got up in the middle of the night, and I'm super thirsty, like all the time in my real life. Like I'm always drinking something. Like anybody who knows me knows that I've always got a water, a lemonade, a Coke. I've always got something. And I wake up, and I'm like, man, I'm thirsty as hell. I'm gonna get up and get some of Aunt Mary's lemonade, because it was like superb lemonade. And I get up and I go make me a glass of lemonade. I'm trying to be quiet with the ice, you know. And I go to go back to bed, and there's a man in the window looking down at my cousin Danny while he's asleep. And he's just like 2 foot away from Danny. He would have been right over me if I'd have still been laying in bed. And he might have been there when I first got up. I truly don't know. I doubt it, because I feel like he'd have ran, because he ran after I screamed bloody murder. Like I just, and you know, I'm just screaming. The dogs are going nuts outside, and my Uncle Donnie and my Aunt Mary, they wake up. Of course, Danny wakes up, and this dude just books it. And I remember he had like this long, shaggy hair. The way I could describe him is, if you've seen that old Dennis the Menace movie in the 90s, the guy who plays like from Back in the Future, the kidnapper in that movie, the long brown hair. But this hair was white, but it was like that long, shaggy hair, and that's kind of how this guy looked. It's just like an old, like kind of like the wild man I told you about earlier, but this was definitely a human. Like this was definitely a person, like wearing clothes and stuff. And he ran into the woods. And I remember my Uncle Donnie's like, what? My Uncle Donnie's a really big guy. And he goes, I tell him what happened. And he goes, you were just dreaming. You woke up from a bad dream. But I'm standing there with a cup of lemonade with like ice. And like, I was like, no, I don't think I was asleep and sleepwalked and made this lemonade and everything else. And then once they realized, like, oh, you weren't in bed when this happened. Like you were up walking around, and like, then you saw it. I was like, yeah. So he walked outside, and sure enough, there was footprints that led, like, the grass. This was like really, really early in the morning, like really early. So the grass was all dewy. So you could see actually where the grass compressions were in the ground, leading right up to the window. And the dogs were still going nuts looking back at the woods. And about a week later, my Uncle Donnie actually came home from work, like earlier on his lunch break or something. And there was a guy trying to like look in the front window, and they ended up calling the cops. And, you know, I truly don't know if they ever caught the guy, or if you know, whatever, but at least I was validated with my uncle saw him like the next week or the same week, looking at, holy shit. When you're not expecting to see an emu and you're telling a scary story. If you're watching on the podcast, I apologize. There was an emu. His name is Harry. He walked up to me and drummed, which is the noise emus make, very loudly. It can be heard from over 2 miles away. It's actually not physically very loud. It's a deep vibration that you can feel over 2 miles away. I forgot he was there. I let him out tonight and scared the hell out of me. Anyhow, the next story I'm going to tell is actually one of our most famous stories on the channel, millions of views, and it's the story of playing hide and go seek in the dark in Appalachia. We used to love playing hide and go seek in the dark. You've heard me say it a few times in this video. I'll say it again. Something in the woods of Appalachia wants you to be out there at nighttime. Every kid that I grew up with, we yearned to do things in the dark, in the woods. And it was just something like, I can't describe. When I think about it, there's like this pit in my stomach that kind of worries me a little bit, but it's the same kind of worry that also excites me. And I don't know how to describe it. It's like it's in your blood or something. And anyhow, we used to play hide and go seek in the dark in Appalachia. And what we would do is my grandma had a basement that was like a fully furnished basement. where half the basement was not underground, or I guess one wall of the basement wasn't underground, but the other 3 walls were. And moonlight would come in through the windows on that side, so you could turn all the lights out in the basement, and you could see the silhouettes of things, but that was it. You could not see any colors, any details. The moonlight would just illuminate just enough where you could see the silhouettes only if your eyes had really adjusted. So how we'd play hide and go seek in the dark is one of us would stand at the light switch with the light switch on. He would close his eyes, or she would close his eyes with their head against the wall, and they would give everybody 60 seconds to hide. And they would count, 1 to 60. And then they would turn the light switch off, and then they would open their eyes, and they would go looking for us in the dark. And we're already hidden. It was a super fun game. Each round took a long time because you're mainly feeling around, and your cousins are going to scare the living daylights out of you when you find them. Like if they're laying on the couch with the couch cushions over them, when you touch the couch cushions, they're going to reach out and grab you and scare you. That's part of the fun. And there's actually something to that. If you know that feeling I'm talking about when you're hiding, waiting to scare someone, it's almost like you get this little tinge of like this evil feeling inside of you, like you're excited to scare them. It's like you want to feel that fear from them. No one knows truly exactly where that comes from. It's some sinister part of our primitive brain that's there, and we don't know why. So we're all excited, waiting to scare each other, and we're, if you're the one with the lights off and you're looking around, you're excited to get scared a little bit. And so my cousin Kyle was the second youngest of us, and it was his turn to do the light switch, and he was maybe 7 years old at the time, at most, and we were about 10. And I remember I was laying on the couch with the pillows over me, like I just said. And my cousin Danny was laying on this freezer, because there was like essentially no divider walls in this basement. It was like one big rectangle with the exception of a canning room in one corner, a bathroom in the other corner, and then this other corner had a little office. So it was a very big basement with 3 little tiny rooms. That was the only things that led off this room, this big giant rectangle. And the freezer was right next to this little office building that we never went into, like this little office room. And it was my grandpa's room, and it just felt wrong to go in there. And the only way I can describe it is not like wrong, like we'd get in trouble for being there. You guys hear that drumming? That's the emu. So it just felt like if you were in there, something was like in there with you. Like there was this overwhelming, powerful feeling when you were in this room that just felt wrong. Like I'm thinking about being in that room right now, and just thinking about being in that room feels wrong. It almost feels like somebody's looking at me as I'm thinking about being in that room, as I'm visualizing it. I'm laying on the couch. My cousin's laying on the freezer. And we see Kyle's silhouette go in between us, and it goes into that room. And we're like, okay, he's going to come out any second. And all of a sudden, bink, the lights came on, and he had never left the light switch. And me and Danny were just like eyes as big as saucers, because he would have had to pass us to get to this light switch. And even if he would have passed us, he could have never made it there in time unless he was sprinting. And where it was so deathly quiet in this basement, you could hear a pin drop in this basement. Like you could hear every footstep somebody was making. That's how you knew when they were close to you, if you couldn't see them. But we never heard the footsteps going between us. We just thought he was walking very carefully and quiet. And immediately I looked at my cousin. I said, "You see that? Did you see?" That was definitely, that was a silhouette of a little boy right in front. I mean, it was the same size as Kyle. But Kyle never left the light switch. He was too scared. So what he did is when he counted to 60, he turned the lights off and then just stood next to the light switch, terrified to move, and just waited for what he felt like was an okay amount of time, and then turned the lights back on, and then act like he played. And then his cousin Cody even verified. His cousin Cody was like, "I saw you the whole time. You never left the light switch, dude. Like you never left. Like you little chicken shit. You never left." And then we were like, "Are you sure, Cody? He never left?" And Cody's like, "Yeah, where I was hiding at, I was by the canning room, and I could see the light switch, and I could see his silhouette there the whole time. He never left that light switch." Me and Danny both pale as a ghost. And like Danny's a tan guy, and we're both pale as a ghost. And we tell the rest of the group what we just saw. We're like, there was a little boy that walked right in front of us and actually stood there for a couple seconds before going. Knowing the history of this place, knowing that National Geographic or Discovery Channel, whoever they were, literally uncovered Indian artifacts there and excavated a whole area and it wasn't a totem pole. People got mad at me for saying that last time, but it was like the Cherokee equivalent of a totem pole, whatever, like this big wooden carving that was found out there. They took all that stuff from that area. And we've always said that we think that was a little Indian boy, because my great-great-grandpa was an Indian child found tied to a tree. Now, that's on my other side of the family. I essentially got no Indian. My other side of the family, they all have a lot of Native American to them. You can tell it when you're looking at them. Me, I got every colonizer gene there ever was. from my dad's side of the family. But my great-great-grandpa, they had to name him Carson. They don't even know how old he was. And he was found tied to a tree with a bunch of other little Native American boys, and they had already died from starvation. That was something pretty common a long time ago. And he was actually adopted in by our family, and that's how, like I said, that's how he came to be in our family. We guessed he was around 2 to 3 years old, maybe 4 at the most. But we've always wondered if that was one of the other boys tied to those trees, or if that was just a Native American boy spirit that belonged there already. Either way, we did not play hide and go seek in the dark anymore that night, and it took us a while before we built up the courage again, but we did play it again. Never saw the shadow of the ghost boy, but in that house, always, we're in that basement, and the staircase was kind of right in the middle of the house, and if you were the only ones home, you would hear footsteps come from the kitchen, and they would go right to the top of that doorway that led down that staircase to where we were at. But the door would never open. You just hear the footsteps. And it became so normal to hear those footsteps, and they would stop right at the top of the staircase. It became so normal that we stopped acknowledging it to the point, and like we would forget about it until somebody, like one of our friends, came over that had never been there before. And like my grandpa would be out in the field working, or my grandma would be like out, in the gardens, because we had these massive gardens. We grew all of our own food and stuff, and you would hear those footsteps, and they'd be like, "Oh, your grandma or grandpa came in," and we'd be like, "Oh, no, they didn't. That's not their footsteps." And sure enough, our friends that would think we were messing with them, and we'd go up there, and there'd be nobody up there. And we're like, yeah, those are the footsteps. Like, don't acknowledge that stuff. Like, you got to pretend like you don't hear it, or it becomes more of a habit. Like, you're always never supposed to acknowledge these things in the moment that they're happening, because it gives them power. We used to hear those footsteps all the time. And like, my family still lives there, and that's still a thing that they all talk about all the time. Like, it's a big joke in our family that, hey, did you hear the footsteps this week? As you can imagine, growing up in Appalachia, we did a lot of deer hunting, a lot of turkey hunting. I had 2 really horrifying experiences while I was in the woods hunting. There's a lot of hunters out there that talk about their experiences, but there's a lot more that have these experiences and don't talk about them, because it is very, like, the stigma is you don't talk about these things because you're crazy, or you're, a sissy or something. Like, that's the norm in these situations. Like, you don't want to talk about that stuff. You don't want to act like you were scared. You don't want to act like you believe in that stuff. Almost every hunter you'll ever find that's hunted a long time by themselves, I got to add that part, by themselves, will say that they have seen some wild stuff in the woods. And if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, please share your stories in the comments. This is a safe place. I like it when people tell me their stories that are similar, and we can kind of put together a roadmap of weird, strange happenings. The first thing that happened was the Whistling Man, which, if you know about the Whistling Man, you know that that is a big no-no to whistle in the dark in Appalachia. It's also a big no-no in Native American folklore. A lot of Native American folklore out here in the Midwest where I live now comes from the East Coast, because in the Trail of Tears they moved out here. Somebody in one of my videos got upset that I was saying all these Native American traditions, and they're like, that's just a ripoff of Appalachia. And I'm like, hold your horses, first of all. They were there first, and you pushed them out west, so they brought the traditions this way with them. So it's the same traditions, they're... Anyhow, we see some weird, spooky things in the woods. And the ghost lights are something that gets reported a lot, especially around that Virginia area of Appalachia, but they happen all over the country, but especially the Appalachian Mountains. And if you don't know about the Appalachian Mountains, they are the oldest mountain range in the world. Like, the Appalachian Mountains are so old. It is crazy how old they are. They are ancient. I don't actually know if they're the oldest in the world. I just know they're old as shit. So we're out there hunting by ourselves. And I say we are out there because this is by myself, but with a group. So like me and my cousins, we've spread out. Like, you go down that trail, I'll go down this trail, I'll go down this trail. And you're actually really far away from each other. You only got there together, and then you split off into very different directions. And I want you to understand something about how I know it wasn't one of them, is because we take this very seriously. And actually the whole country does, because of what happened to my family. My Uncle Wayne, my family probably doesn't even want me to tell this, but my great Uncle Wayne is one of the reasons why hunters have to wear orange in the United States. My great uncle, before I was even born, he was shot in the neck during a hunting accident by his neighbor. And they were both hunting on their lines of their property. So the neighbor was on his line, my great uncle was on his line, but they were very close to the meeting point. And my great uncle was wearing a tan vest because he didn't think about anybody, or a tan jacket. He didn't think about anybody being there. And the neighbor actually shot him in the throat in front of his son. So like the neighbor's son was with the neighbor, and he said, "Bam, we got a deer, son." And they walk over and they find my Uncle Wayne dead. They think he died instantly, never even saw it coming. And when the police got there, they wanted to make sure that it wasn't on purpose, obviously. They took my Uncle Wayne's jacket off of him and they put it on a stick, and they kind of waved it around in that bush, and another police officer went over to where the gunshot happened, and they both agreed that it looked exactly like a deer, like the same color coding and everything, and it was deer season. And it was just an unfortunate accident. It was just a really unfortunate accident. Really sad. So my family takes that extremely serious, especially my grandmother, which is his sister, takes it very seriously. So we know we don't go anywhere near where the other one of us are hunting at, like nowhere near it. And we always communicate very heavily where we're going to be at hunting. So I'm on the very left trail of this. It's everybody's favorite split. We rotate who gets to have this ridge because it is the most successful hunting ridge out there. And further down the trail, and this is how I know it couldn't have been one of them, because further down the trail, somebody would have had to pass me to even get to this point. I haven't even made it to my tree stand yet, and I see a light turn on, and it looked just like somebody turning on a flashlight. But it didn't have like a beam going through the woods. It was almost like if somebody would have the flashlight pointing straight at me, but from 200 yards away. Because out there in total darkness, you can see the smallest, faintest light from forever away. Like, so 200-300 yards away, it looked like somebody had a flashlight directly pointed towards me. So I remember I was a few feet away from my tree stand, and I remember I didn't take my eyes off that spot. Like, even while I'm climbing the tree stand, I'm keeping my eyes on that point, because the light came on just for a few seconds, then went back off. And I never, like, the sun had not came up yet. It was about 30 to 45 minutes from coming up. And I literally did not take my eyes away from that spot because I was so freaked out and I was so afraid to move and come back down, because I was a good walk away from where we had met up at. Like, I had walked a long ways to get here. So I was essentially by myself, and there's like no cell phone service out here once you're there. It's another reason why we don't move once we're in our tree stands, is because there's not cell phone service to communicate with each other about this. And I know at the end of this ridge, it is sheer cliffs. There's no way to come up from the other side. So I'm thinking, the only thing in my head I'm thinking is there's a trespasser that got out here before I did. So as the sun comes up, I can see that spot. But, you know, there's a lot of brush. There's a lot of trees in the way. This time of year, all the leaves are off of them. And I'm watching that spot. And the sun comes up. And where that light had came from, it would have been physically impossible. And that's what I was afraid of, like, this whole time. Because where this light came from, it is just cliffs. I mean, just, you would have fallen 100 feet plus on rocks. And if you know anything about ghost lights, they do one of two things. They lead you to a great discovery where you might find somebody that's dead and report it. There's so many true crime cases where people said, "Oh, I just came across this body because there was a light that guided me there. I saw a light and I wondered who it was and found this dead body, or I found these remains, or I found these belongings." But the other story of ghost lights is if you follow them, they can lead you to great misfortune. And if I would have followed that ghost light, I would have fallen off those cliffs in the dark because I could not see. It was so dark. So if I would have went to investigate, I could have quite literally fallen to my death, or fallen and got injured and not be able to call someone for help. I always think about, like, to this day, I think about what made that light, why did it make that light, and what would have happened if I would have followed it. Because if you know about the Fey lights, I'm not even supposed to talk about that in the dark. They can take you to a different dimension through portals. And I'm not going to get into that right now, because I've had a very chilling experience on this property with that, and I don't want to discuss it. I wish I wouldn't have even said what I said a second ago. This has been a fun night talking to y'all. I'm going to do one more story, and then I'm going to bounce for the night. I've done a full deep dive like this before of what's happened to me since I've lived in Oklahoma. The last story for my Tennessee homes is we moved to another new house. So we lived in 4 homes when I lived in Tennessee, when I was a child anyhow, not when I got older. And this home, we got it for a great deal because the previous owner hung himself in the backyard at a storage shed. You've heard me tell this story too. So he had a storage shed out there that set about, I guess the peak of the ceiling would have been about 10 feet off the ground, maybe 9 foot. And it had a little support post that came off the front of it, which I think was to hang deer, to clean and dress deer. Well, he hung himself from it. And when we moved in, we got rid of that storage shed, but you could see the perfect square outline because the foundation of it was still on the ground. So you knew exactly where it was. My dogs, and this is how I know animals can see things we can't see. My dogs used to go to that exact front of that square foundation, exactly where he would have been. They would show their teeth and they would stand their hair up and they would squat down on their hind legs and look up, like, I mean, exactly where he would have been hanging. And it's not like I could tell the dogs about this and they would know to be scared of that spot. And they would just growl and carry on, and they would do this about once every other week. And it would take them about a full minute or two to get over it. I mean, and a minute or two is a long time to see your dog just stand there and go and just be fighting mad. And these dogs were the calmest dogs in the world. They were golden retrievers. They were super chill, super laid back, and they would just go absolutely nuts at this one spot. I cannot explain how they would have felt that negative energy or that bad energy and that sensation, but they did, and they did it so routinely that I would try to never ever walk with them to that part of the yard. That was in the very back corner of the yard, and I used to never want to take them that way ever when we would go on our walks, because this house was in the middle of a neighborhood in town. And they just always, and we checked that area out. There was no rabbit's nest back there. There was nothing there back there. And they would look at the sky. You know, they weren't looking at the ground, and they would circle the spot. So I knew that they weren't looking at something that was past that. When we first moved into that house, we painted and redid the whole house. And they always say spirits hate it when you change things, especially because it's taking away their memory, I guess, or you're messing with their belongings. And I remember the first night we moved there, we painted in the house, and there was we were all in the kitchen, just exhausted, talking about, moving everything in and painting and all this stuff. And there was just this tremendous bang on the inner wall of the house, like the central wall of the house, because we all agreed it came from right next to us. And it was such a loud bang, it actually shook the table. It was so loud, my mom and my grandmother, who was there helping, actually thought somebody ran into the side of the house with a vehicle. They thought somebody had came up off the road and drove into the house. That is how tremendous of a explosion this was. We searched that whole house over for something that might have fallen over in the move, for a big picture to have fallen off the wall, and nothing was disturbed. Everything looked like it should be, because the house was pretty much empty at this point, because we were really just painting the walls and stuff at this point. There wasn't even that much of our stuff in there besides some beds. Super, super weird. I hope you guys enjoyed this story. If you want me to finish out these stories of going into my teenager years and my young adult life, I've got so many more. Little tidbit here, my uncle always thought it was me that was haunted. Growing up, my uncle used to always joke that he would never want to babysit me or watch me because he always got creeped out from just a feeling that he would get when I was there. And I never knew what to do there, because I heard him say that as a kid, and I didn't know what to do with that, or it's just a little tidbit to throw in there. I hope you really enjoyed this. If you're watching this on Facebook or TikTok, go support our YouTube and our podcast that we just started. It's called Matt, M-A-T-T, from Nomads. Matt from Nomads on all Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube. We'd love to have you over there. If you're listening on the podcast, thank you for being a real champ, a real hero. Follow our YouTube, our Facebook and our TikTok. It's called Nomads Animal Encounter. I hope you enjoyed tonight's story.
Imagine thinking you're just having a regular day at your uncle's house, and a spirit comes to you, letting you know how your uncle raped and unalived her. Yeah, cousins, this is going to be a long one, so let's not waste no time, and let's get into it. Now, for this story time, we're going to call her Becca. So back in 2009, around July 4th, Becca and her family went down to Arkansas to visit their other family members. Now, they stayed in Arkansas for about a week because they was having a family reunion. Now, Becca also had a twin. And one weekend, her and her twin wanted to go to their favorite uncle house, and we're going to call him Uncle Tim. Now, when they arrived at Tim's house, he did tell them that they could stay the night. However, do not go into his cellar roaming around. Tim did have a farm out there behind his house, so he did tell them that they can go out there and feed the horses and play with the horses. However, come back to the front when you're done. So, of course, being kids playing around, Becca, her twin, and her cousin Tracy, which was also there, wanted to play tag. Tracy is a girl, by the way. So the twin went to go count while Becca and Tracy went to go hide. So Becca told Tracy, let's go hide in the cellar. She said the way Tracy's eyes just widened and said no. So Becca just grabbed Tracy's arm and said, girl, let's go. Stop being scary. So they went into the cellar. Now, during this time, Becca said they didn't have smartphones and iPhones and everything of that nature. But however, Tim did keep flashlights around in the cellar because they used to have really bad tornadoes. Becca ended up finding a flashlight, and her and Tracy just ended up having a little scavenger hunt while her twin was still trying to find where they're at. Now, once the twin finally found them, he told them that he was going to tell Uncle Tim that they went into his cellar when he told them not to. Becca told him to shut up and get a flashlight and said keep the cellar door cracked just enough in case they hear him coming. Now, Becca said this cellar was big enough that you can put sheeps in it. So as they roaming around, they end up finding old chains, tools, butcher knives, and even a box that was locked. So Becca wandered off to a section in the cellar that looked like it used to be an old bathroom and a toilet used to be there. She said she ended up finding a pair of little girls' clothing. So what was so odd about it is that it was freshly wet. Maybe it was water, maybe it was blood, but it didn't have a smell to it yet. She said that scared her and she immediately started to run and tell her twin brother. However, when she turned around, Tracy and her twin was right there looking with her. So the twin began to dig even further. They ended up finding a missing persons flyer with the little girl on it. The flyer was an African-American little girl and her name was Georgia. That whole bathroom looked like it was filled with nothing but blood. She was freaked out. She told her twin and Tracy, let's get up out of here. And they were so glad they did not get caught by Uncle Tim. Now, the next day, Becca and her family ended up going to the park. So Becca ended up whispering in her mother's ear everything that they found in Uncle Tim's cellar. Now, Becca's mom ended up telling her and her twin that Uncle Tim was a known egg offender and to never go back to his house without her or her dad being present. Becca's mom also told them that no girls in their family was ever allowed to spend the night over at Tim's house because of that very reason. So as Becca lay down to go to sleep that night, she started hearing toys go off in the next room. Now, she said there wasn't any babies in the house for the toys to be going off. The youngest person in the house was her sister, and she was only 4, and she was asleep at this time. Becca said she was the only one up because the toys woke her up as she's trying to go back to sleep. She hear her dad gets up trying to figure out who's pushing these toys in this music box for it to go off. But it was nobody. Everyone was asleep except Becca, and she was still in her room. Becca said she had a feeling it was the little girl spirit trying to reach out and get her attention. She said she was not scared because she was already familiar with having spirits reach out to her. She said, but somehow, some way, she fell back asleep. She said the young girl proceeds to come to her and contact her in her dreams, and she remembered this dream so vividly. Now, in Becca's dream, cousins, we're approaching the time limit. So guys, it will be a second part to this story I'm going to have posted as well. But as you guys are watching this video, make sure that you like, comment, repost, and share it to the next person. Okay, we all cousins, share it out. If you guys have a spooky, scary story time or anything paranormal that has happened to you that you want to share to me and the world, please don't hesitate to send me a DM or send it to the email that's in my bio. Until part 2 is posted, enjoy this story time. What's up, cousins? So just like I said, I'm back with part 2 of Becca's story. So again, let's not waste no time and let's get into it. So as Becca went to sleep that night, the little girl came to Becca's dreams. Becca said the little girl had pink and white barrettes with black bows, and she had dimples, and she had on the same clothing that Becca had found earlier in Uncle Tim's cellar. Becca said she felt like the little girl was trying to show her what happened to her because the dream went to the little girl being outside at her house riding a bike, and then a man, a tall man, snatched her up. So as the little girl is being snatched off her bike, she's kicking and screaming for help, but the man ended up throwing her in the back of his truck. Becca said the little girl was trying to tell her something, but she couldn't make out the words that she was saying. When this tall guy was attempting to hit the little girl with something, Becca said she woke up panicking, and it was 7 o'clock in the morning. So when she got out the bed and went downstairs, her aunt was in the kitchen cooking for everybody that stayed at her house. When she looked outside, she saw her twin outside playing with fireworks, so she ended up running to her twin, crying and telling him what happened in her dream. Becca also told her twin that she doesn't think the little girl that they found on that paper is coming back because she believed that was the girl in her dream that was trying to tell her that her uncle raped her and unalived her. Her twin begins to ask if she tell anybody. Becca says she hasn't told anybody but him about the dream, but she did tell their mom what she found in Uncle Tim's cellar. The twin told her don't tell nobody else because sooner or later it's going to get back to Uncle Tim. So later on that day, Becca ended up asking her mom could they go back to Uncle Tim's house because Becca felt like she needed some answers on what was going on. Becca said the whole time that she was outside, she just felt the little girl presence as if it was forcing her to go find out the truth and what happened. Now later on, Becca ended up finding out that her uncle was actually dating the little girl's mother. So her aunt ended up having a family barbecue, and the little girl mom came because her uncle is dating her. When the mom arrived, she has a shirt of a missing person, which is the little girl that Becca saw in her dreams. Becca overheard the woman sobbing to her uncle and her aunt about how the police doesn't have any leads and that her daughter is still missing. So Uncle Tim is consoling the mom as if he doesn't know what happened to this little girl. But Becca knew that her uncle had something to do with that little girl disappearance. Becca said she could not get out of her mind how the shirt that this woman had on was the same missing flyer that she saw in his cellar. Becca wanted to tell that woman so bad what she had saw in Tim's cellar, but she knew that adults did not believe kids, and she was also told what goes on in this house stays in this house. Becca ended up telling her mom what she had overheard from the woman. So her mom ended up making contact with the woman and telling her exactly what Becca had said. Just like Becca thought, no one really did believe her. They wanted to see it for themselves. So Becca said it's getting dark. It's around 7 p.m. and the woman wanted to see for herself exactly what Becca saw. So the woman ended up pretending that she was taking Becca and her mom to the store so Becca could tell her exactly what her twin, and Tracy saw. As Becca proceeded to tell this woman what she saw, she said the lady was shaking so bad she almost crashed her car. The woman did say she did have a feeling that either he knew something or knew of something that happened to her daughter, because every time she brought her up, he could never make eye contact with her and he would sweat really bad. She said although he seemed like he cared and was consoling her, she felt like God was giving her signs through her body that something was not right with this man. Now, when they got back to her aunt's house, Tim and the woman started arguing because Tim was questioning the woman as to why he took his nieces somewhere and did not tell him. The woman played it off and said that I took your nieces to the store because she was crying for some snacks. Becca ended up showing Tim her snack bag. So Tim ended up picking up Becca, asking her, are you okay? Did she do anything to you? Did she try anything? Becca said, no, I'm okay. Although she said she was scared because why are you picking me up? Her dad immediately came over and snatched her from him. Her dad tells Tim, don't you ever pick up my daughter again because you're not her father. Then he proceeds to tell Becca to go play with the other kids. So as Becca's walking over, her twin grabs her and say, did you tell that woman what we saw? Becca said, yeah, I did. So they was all out playing till about 10 o'clock that night till the adults told them that it's dark and to get in the house. Becca's mom ended up telling her dad everything that Becca had told her. So that night, Becca's parents packed up her and her siblings and they went and stayed at the hotel. Although they were still staying in town for 2 more days, Becca's dad told them that they was keeping them safe by bringing them to the hotel. So 2 days later, they're heading back home to Milwaukee. As they're on the ride back home, Becca's mom ended up getting a call, and all she could hear was crying through the phone from her aunt, but she did not know what the conversation was about. Now, when Becca's mom hangs up the phone, she ended up telling them that the police raided Uncle Tim's house the previous night. And they ended up finding everything that Becca said she had saw except the little girl's clothing. He ended up burying the clothing 30 miles from where he lived. Because of what Becca told the woman, she had even more of a suspicion that he had something to do with her disappearance. So instead of going alone, she ended up contacting the police, telling her everything. They ended up going to his house and questioning him. That's when the police found specks of blood and issued a warrant. When the police came back with the search warrant, they found blood from his house to his attic to his cellar that belonged to the little girl. Until this day, the man is incarcerated, and this happened in 2009. Yes, cousins, that was a lot. So if you guys have any stories that you want to tell me, please don't hesitate to send it to my DM or the email that's in my bio. Now make sure you guys like, share, comment, and repost. Until next time, enjoy the story time.
Want to get creeped out? Let's talk about Ouija, also known as Ouija, so the Ouija board. I recently went to an event at a haunted museum in Winnipeg where we played with a Ouija board, and you know what? I know a lot of people don't love to hear that. Personally, I'm not afraid of a Ouija board. Sue me. So let's talk about it a little bit. Why are people terrified of it? Well, first of all, let's talk about the inspiration for the movie The Exorcist. The inspiration for this came from a real life story about a boy named Roland Doe, and this happened in 1949. He used a Ouija board with his aunt, and some strange things started happening. strange noises, scratches appearing, which escalated to violent behavior and exorcism. Then we have people who always talk about encountering this one specific demon when using the Ouija board, which is known as, I know people don't like it when I say it, but Zozo, Z-O-Z-O. People allegedly are using the Ouija board and having these terrifying responses from this entity that has also allegedly possessed people. There's also something known as Harold's Cross possession, which occurred in Ireland. A woman used the Ouija board and was allegedly possessed afterwards and required a Catholic exorcism. There's also tons of Reddit stories, TikTok experiences, and a lot of paranormal investigators who refuse to use them. I'm a paranormal investigator. I am happy to use a Ouija board. Personally, it's not my favorite. I prefer collecting data from equipment. However, I have heard stories of people trying them and having really, really crazy, cool, interesting paranormal experiences, and I'm not discounting that. I'm just saying I have not experienced that, in my opinion. But I'll get it more into my beliefs later. But let's talk about the history of this talking board. Originally had nothing to do with demons and was really a parlor game. There was a huge spiritualist movement in the 1800s where people were really fascinated and interested in communicating with the deceased. They had table tipping, spirit knocks, like the Fox sisters. You can do a video on them if you want to hear about it. Alphabet boards, talking boards, and mediums literally becoming celebrities. A man named Charles Kennard wanted to capitalize on the spiritualism craze. So he founded the talking board in 1890, and Elijah Bond patented the board in 1891. It again was designed as a novelty or parlor game, and even sometimes marketed as a dating game because you're getting cozy with someone, putting your little fingers near each other's fingers, you know, sitting real close in the dark, romantic, trying to contact the dead, romantic. They actually asked the board what it should be called, and Ouija came out. There's different theories on what that means. One of the women who was participating, I can't remember her name, but she's important, she had a locket on, and inside the locket was a picture of a woman named Ouida, and so they think maybe it came from that, or we meaning yes, and ja in German meaning yes. Yes, yes, naming yes, yes. You know, I don't know. William Fuld, he didn't invent it. He took over production, and he was a very brilliant marketer and helped make it a household name. It wasn't until 1966 that the Parker brothers bought the rights to the Ouija board and sold millions. It even outsold Monopoly. Before 1973, this was a family game, party entertainment. People were curious about it, and it was sold alongside other games. But the Exorcism movie changed everything, and Christians, and especially Catholics, really came in and started telling people that this is dangerous, you're messing with things you shouldn't be messing with, and, you know, using a talking board leads to demonic possession. Public perception on the Ouija board literally changed so drastically, and something that was once seen as innocent and fun became evil and something to be terrified of. So how does the Ouija board work? Theory 1, spirits. They're moving the board. And I have heard people say, like, they've seen a planchette move on a board by itself. I would literally die to witness that, but I never have. Another theory, the ideomotor effect. We make tiny unconscious muscle movements and nobody realizes that they're actually moving the planchette, but they are. There is another theory though, and this is kind of a theory that I more subscribe to, which is that some people who might be more attuned to the spirit world, those ideomotor effects are influenced by information that they're getting that they might not realize they're getting. And I think I believe that a little more because I have literally never seen a planchette move on its own, and I'm a huge science girly. I'm a healthy skeptic, but I've had experiences that make me believe in the paranormal. So would you use a Ouija board? Have you used a Ouija board? And do you think that goes demonic possession?
There was a door at the end of my aunt's hallway that I have never seen open until one night I heard somebody unlock it from the inside. So my aunt's house was very old, but it was never creepy. It was actually one of my favorite places to hang out growing up. It had a bunch of rooms downstairs, it had the coolest basement, and it had like this tree house, like probably half a mile away from the house. Anyways, there's always this room upstairs, and it was always locked, and I did ask my aunt one time, like, what's in this bedroom, why is it always locked? And she said, oh, it's just storage. I never thought much of it until years later. I was staying at my aunt's house for a couple of nights while she recovered from surgery, and I was sleeping on the couch downstairs, and I heard some footsteps upstairs in the hallway, and I assumed that it was just my aunt. That's when I remembered that my aunt was actually sleeping in a bedroom downstairs, and so I went up the stairs very quietly, and I noticed that I heard a doorknob jiggling at the end of the hallway, and it was that locked bedroom that I've never seen open before. And it sounded like a ding, like a key was in the knob trying to turn it, and I watched it turn like an inch. Then I heard somebody whisper from the inside, "You need to not be here." And I ran downstairs. I woke my aunt up, I told her what I heard, and she looked terrified. Not confused, she looked terrified. And she asked me exactly what I said, and so I told her. And then she told me something that she hasn't told me before. She said that she had a stepbrother a long time ago and he disappeared when he was 22 years old. And eventually the family just kind of stopped talking about him. It sounds awful, but that's what happened. Anyways, that's where he used to sleep, right? And so we went up the stairs together in the morning and she unlocked the door and we opened it up together. And it was a bedroom, it had a dresser, really dusty mirror, bed, whatever. Nothing was in it except there was a sentence that was inside of the door. And it said, "I'm still here." We immediately shut the door and we went downstairs and we didn't open that door back up. A couple weeks later, my aunt hired somebody to come and renovate the bedroom. The story just gets worse from there. As it was being renovated, they actually found a little staircase behind one of the walls in the bedroom and it led down into a tiny crawl space. And in that crawl space was like a large wooden box. My aunt said that nobody's going to open this box and she demanded to have it thrown away so nobody knows what was in the box. But then she told me this: the night before her stepbrother disappeared, she said that he came downstairs and he was telling the family that at night he could hear somebody walking through inside of the walls and nobody believed him. The next morning, he was gone.
Never sleep with your door open. This has to be one of the creepiest stories you're about to hear, so if you're alone right now, do not listen to the story at night. A man claimed that when he was a kid, he was always visited by something in his doorway every single night. Until this day, this incident traumatized him and he will not sleep with his door open. He said this started when he was about 8 years old. His parents would always make sure to tuck him in and close the door at night, but every time he would wake up at the certain time, the door would be open. The first night he woke up and he heard something whisper, "Are you awake?" But this voice wasn't anything familiar. It sounded very weird. And of course, at 8 years old, he was absolutely terrified. He did not want to uncover himself. The door kept creaking and it was like the footsteps. You could hear the footsteps on the wooden floor. So he decided to uncover his eye, and what he saw was something super terrifying. There was something crouched in the hallway staring at him. It was skinny. The arms were a little too long for the body. It looked like a human, but not really. This thing wouldn't come inside. It would talk to him. It would try to lure him to the door, but he would not step not even a single foot inside. This thing would visit him every single night. He tried telling his parents, but of course no one's gonna believe an 8-year-old, right? But his parents did find it odd that they would close the door and in the morning they would find the door completely open. Creepy thing would learn new things about him every single day. He would learn the name of his best friend, the name of his parents, his name, and sometimes it would even mimic his mother's voice. He claimed that this happened up until he was 13 years old. So as soon as he turned 13, this thing stopped. But of course, prior to that, he made sure he locked his door every single time. It's been so long since he's seen this creature, and even as an adult, his family still doesn't believe him.
Another day, another what the hell is that? And no, I'm not talking about this cute little dog here. I'm talking about something that showed up in a home that was not supposed to be there. Now, can you see what showed up? All right, time's up. Do you see this person right here? She had taken the photo of the friend. The friend looks at it, immediately notices the person, but she'd taken 2 photos. Here's the other one. Now, you can't see anyone down the hallway, so you think, okay, they might have just walked across the hallway, except this is the end of the hallway. There's nothing that could have looked like a woman. Now, I know how a lot of you think. You're thinking, okay, Sherlock, it doesn't take a genius to figure out someone just walked from this way to this way, except there's no door down here, for one. So, no, it was way down here. It could have been standing here. Someone could have been standing here and went in here, except the woman that posted this photo was upset because she was scared because she lives alone. And she has no idea who that woman could have been. Here's the woman that she doesn't know who that person is. Zoom in on it. Look at it. Let me know what you think about it. If you like stuff like this, like, comment, share, follow for more, and let me know what you think that is in the comments.
This photo randomly showed up on my Nokia cell phone that I never let anyone borrow. I don't know who the man in the photo is, or the child walking in front of the camera. The child looks more like a doll or a toy. It definitely doesn't look human. I have no idea where this photo came from, but that thing in the front terrifies me. A former classmate posted this photo on Facebook. It shows a figure captured on camera at an area called Old Stoneface in the Pipestone National Monument. This monument is next to the Pipestone Cemetery and is part of Native American land. The person who took the photo is well respected in the community and has not posted about paranormal activity in the past. Many people who have come across this photo believe it could be an indigenous spirit. My coworker showed me this video caught on his security camera that he has on the side of his house. Only people who live in the house have access to that area, and nobody was home when the video was taken. This photo was taken by Haley Ogletree in Georgia after a day of fishing. When her dad was putting away the equipment, she decided to take a selfie and captured this. According to her dad, there was nobody standing near him while he was putting the equipment away. To this day, they have no idea what they captured.
Okay, this is a story time of how I nearly got kidnapped. Okay, so this happened back in February, so I feel like I can talk about it without getting in trouble. So I was walking to work. It was literally 10 o'clock in the morning. I had my headphones in, I had earmuffs on, it was cold, it was February. I just walked off the park and the park comes onto a road. I'm going to show as much proof as I can in this. This is the best way I can show it, okay? So I was walking through this park and it comes onto this street called Coleridge Street. I was walking like right here where this tree is. So I was about near this tree. A learner was coming up and a car was coming down and they had pulled on about here. And they pulled on really recklessly, but I just assumed that they were making room for the learner. They was there for about 15 seconds after the learner had passed, but then came back off the street and pulled back on around here. I was about 20 feet away at this point, and they waited there until I was about 5 foot away from the car. The driver then continues to get out of his car and walk towards me in an embrace as if he was going to embrace me like this or grab me. I instantly turn off my headphones and because his mouth starts moving, so he started talking. This man was not speaking English or he was just saying gibberish because I could not understand him. I say pardon and his whole demeanour just changes. He then continues to talk and I still can't understand him, so I just go, "No thank you sir," and he gets so aggressive. He starts screaming at me, calling me every name under the sun that you could just think of being called to a girl. Then he lunges at me, so I run across the road. In that time, during that whole interaction, I've already observed what he's wearing, what race he was, what colour his hair was, and what colour his car was. I thought it was a grey. I also looked in his passenger window and saw there was a passenger in his seat who was also of the same race. When I ran across the road, I pressed call to my mum's phone. She was not at work that day and it felt like my guardian angels were watching over me because she immediately picked up the phone and heard this man screaming at me. I pick up my phone and go like this and I turn and this man is literally, I'm going to say, about 3 foot behind me. He sees I'm on the phone, sprints to his car. This street I was on also leads on to my uncle's street, but he lives at the end of that road and it would easily take me a minute to run there, maybe a bit less. So I don't see that as a safe option as he's just ran into his car and he could easily do a U-turn and follow me onto that road. So across the road that I ran onto, there was 2 cars. The pavement's here, I was stood at the pavement and he was in his car. Him and his passenger continued to scream and shout and do this and do everything to me, and I'm turning the phone and that shits them up. My mum's already jumped in the car at this point. She was literally a minute away and they saw and sped off in the direction I walked to work, so I just didn't see that as a safe option, so I turned around and started walking really quickly back towards where my uncle lives. At this point my mum's turned up but they've already been gone for a minute, and I get in the car and I have a mini panic attack. And she goes, "Which way did they go? Tell her which way they go." We also used to live around this area, so we know the area like the back of our hand. So we went looking for them. We couldn't find them, so we drove to work. I went in and I said to my boss, "I'm going to be a minute, I'm just sorting out a situation." She could see I was panicking, so she just let me off. I got back in the car, we rang the police. I gave them the description. They congratulated me for calling my mum and getting out safely. They take my details, they take my mum's details, and they ask was there cameras in that area. So we drove back to the house it happened outside of, because I'm pretty sure they had cameras there because they've lived there for a while. We don't know them, but we know they've been there for a while. The man continues to say he saw the whole situation from his kitchen window, but his cameras don't work. So he gives us his details and he will do a statement to the police. So we give the details to the police, and I don't know if they did take his statement or not. But I just go on my day, I go to work, my mum picks me up because obviously it's no longer safe. But then she shows me an article off Derbyshire Live. By the way, this whole situation happened around 10:40 on the 19th of February. The statement says, a driver has been arrested after a car being pursued by the police in Derby crashes into another vehicle, leaving a passenger with serious injuries. The police were called at 10:50. It was a blue BMW 1 Series driving dangerously at the car park of Asda Synfit. Where I was walking is a 6-minute drive. I googled it, a 6-minute drive away from Asda Synfit. And that 4 minutes they've got is enough to cause enough trouble and get the police called. So the driver ended up getting tased and it was under suspicion of drink driving and remained in police custody. Then another statement got put out that said, a man has been charged with a string of alleged offences after police pursuit through Derby yesterday, obviously on the 19th, so it was the 20th. The guy's name was Hussein Khalid, and he was charged with driving without a licence, driving without insurance, dangerous driving, failure to stop, drink driving, failing to provide a sample for Class A drug test, and driving while disqualified. I told the police I told them their exact description, that he was Asian, either Pakistani or Indian, black hair, grey outfit, and the passenger looked similar, and he was about 6 foot, looked early 30s or late 20s. He was 28 years old, by the way. And the second man in his 20s, who was a passenger, was also arrested on suspicion of a public order offence. So what happened to me? Well, that's what we assumed that it was. So I'm pretty sure the driver got arrested, and I don't know what's happened to him now, and the passenger I think got let out on parole or whatever, or like on a fine or something. But it was suspicion of a public order offence, so we believe that's what happened to me. But the driver didn't get done for that, even though it was the driver. Victim support rang me. I didn't need the support, so I just turned it down. And then I got a message sent from the police. This was the message that I got. But I didn't end up doing that. I don't know why we didn't do it. I just don't think we got around to doing it. But nothing ever came of it. I think that the public order offence was about me, but we're not too sure, and it's not really been officiated, and nothing's really been said in the 6 months, because this happened in February. It's now nearly September. But that happened. I nearly got kidnapped. Trust struggle. Literally, I knew the second that he pulled on really recklessly onto the road that something bad was going to happen, and I wasn't wrong. And I instantly called my mum. You're probably thinking, why didn't you call the police? Because my mum was closest. She was 5 minutes away, and she made that fucking drive like 3. She got there quicker than the police would, and I'm safe, and I'm fine, and I'm okay. But really, if you think about it, if they had got me in that car somehow, they would have crashed. I could have been. But to be honest, I would rather be raped by 2 men. Or, you know, you never know, trafficked or anything. You never know. But that was not fun. But it happened. It's over now. It's been dealt with partially. They got repercussions for something else that happened. But my heart goes out for the woman that got injured. But, you know what? They got done for that. At least she got justice. I don't think I got justice, but, you know, it's fine. It is what it is. Nothing actually happened to me. Just I got harassed by 2 men in a car. But you really don't know what could have happened. But you know what? I'm fine. I gave you the proof.
It happened to me, and I can't explain it. The woman telling this story says, I have a weird experience that I genuinely cannot explain. For the story, we're gonna call her Tara. Excuse my loss of my voice, I apologize. So Tara says from 2023 to 2025, we're just gonna call the business she worked at Place A. She says it was in a shopping plaza with one of those really big signs out front that list all the businesses. And she said for years, the sign had Place A's name in its own company font and logo. So in 2025, they were bought out by a corporate company. So then the company changed names, and we're just going to call it Company B for the story. Okay, so a few months after the transition, the landlord updated the entire plaza sign because other businesses had also moved in too. So they removed all of those custom logos that made all the businesses' names look unique and just put them all in plain font. So for months, Tara would drive to work every day, seeing Company B now in that list and in a generic font, and that just became the norm. So one Monday, as she was driving to work, something felt off inside. She said, "It's hard to describe. I almost felt like disconnected, like everything was real, but didn't quite feel real," if that makes any sense. So Tara pulls into the shopping plaza. She looks up at the sign and froze. Her heart drops because every single business was back to its original font/logo. Like, Place A's name was actually also back in there the way that it used to be. It had the original font and logo as well. It was like the entire sign had reverted. And she remembers thinking, I should take a picture because this is crazy. But here's the part that still bothers her, and honestly, it gives me goosebumps too. She said it wasn't just that she decided not to take a picture. She said it felt like she shouldn't, like it was wrong to do so. She said the thought came into my head, but at the same time, it felt like some part of me was saying, don't, it's not necessary. She goes, I can't explain it. I just accepted it, went into work, and I never mentioned it to anybody, which I would have been freaking out about it, asking everybody. So Tuesday now, the next day, the company was closed and she was off. So when she came back Wednesday, she looked up at that sign immediately, obviously, and everything was back to normal. The Company B in the generic font was there, exactly how it had been for months prior. She said, I have looked up at that sign almost every single shift since, and it has never changed again. She said, I know people will say I misinterpreted it or my brain filled it in what I wanted to fill in. She said, but I also know what I remember seeing, and I have never had another experience like it. And the strangest part isn't even the sign, it's that overwhelming feeling that I wasn't supposed to take a picture or didn't need to. So what are our thoughts? I love a good glitchy story. Guys, drop them in the comments. If you have a glitch story of your own, you got to share it, submit it into my email. And if you are interested in Creepy Storytime merch, check out the link in my bio. And if you're new here, follow for more Creepy Storytime.
This is a photo I accidentally took on my Polaroid, which is why it shows up a little bit blurry. I didn't think anything of it since nothing appeared in the first few minutes, but when I checked on the photo, I got a little creeped out. The dog in the picture is not alive. That dog was my childhood pet that passed away around 6 years ago. My cousin, my sister, and I were sitting outside and we were facing an abandoned office building. As we were talking to each other, my sister pointed out that she saw something moving at the office window. We took a picture of it, but since it was too dark, we lightened the picture, and this is what we saw. This happened to my mother in April of 2025. We still have no explanation for what her security camera captured. Her camera is motion activated. When it detects movement, it records and also takes a still photograph at the exact moment that the movement is detected. Around 11 p.m. one night, my mother was in bed watching TV when she received a notification that the camera had detected movement. When she opened it, she saw the attached photo. At first, she thought it was actually a person and asked her partner to go outside and check. Within seconds, he was outside, but there was absolutely nobody there. The camera's video recording turned out completely black. I took this picture last summer when I was in the hospital. I was walking down the hall and I wanted to take a photo for my friends. Later on, when I zoomed in on the photo, somebody was standing there. But when I was taking the picture, no one was there.
The Lindsay Clancy case is very eerily similar to another case from 1981. That was a case of Arn Johnson. Now, you might remember him from Ed and Lorraine Warren. That was when they went to court because they claimed this man had been possessed which caused him to unalive his landlord. And one of the things that he said is, before this all transpired, is that he heard voices telling him to do it. And not only that, he went into this trance-like state, and then when he came out of it, he had no recollection of what exactly happened. And throughout history, we have seen sort of this same exact setup, where there have been these domestic cases of family members unaliving other family members in the same exact manner. They hear these voices, they go into this trance-like state, and then when they come out, they have no recollection of what happened. For instance, Lizzie Borden, Robert DeFeo, okay? And like I said, Arn Johnson. Cases that seem to mimic one another and have sort of this same setup over and over again. So what exactly is going on? What continuously causes these same things to happen? And when you look at a lot of cases of demonic possession, they speak of sort of hearing voices telling them to do very bad things, going into trance-like states, and sometimes committing very heinous acts. So my question is it possible that Lindsay Clancy had or was under the influence of some kind of demonic oppression or possession?
Here are more spooky stories that I found in my TikTok comments. Let's go! I lost my ring on a water slide on holiday. It was a silver ring that I never took off. When I got home, I found it on my bed. I was absolutely wearing it in the swimming pool. This all happened when I was between 4 and 6 years old. I was staying over at my grandparents' house. When I woke up during the night, I threw a pillow out of my crib. Something threw it back, so I threw the pillow again. This happened a few times. I didn't know what it was. It could have been an entity or my uncle. He was living with my grandparents at the time. I really don't know what it was. Over 1 year ago, I was on the phone with my friend. I'll call him Mark. Me and Mark were laughing and we were talking as always, and after about 5 minutes of us being on a call, I hear my cat hissing loud and I was confused. So I said to him, "I'll be back," and I walked away. I see my cat hissing, and as he was looking at the top of the stairs, I told him to stop. I looked at the top of the stairs and there was a little girl I had never seen before. I ran back screaming, saying, "Mark, I think someone broke in." I grabbed my phone and I showed him the stairs. After I showed him, I was about to go back to the living room. Then I hear a loud crash in my mom's room and my cat was in the kitchen, so I run upstairs screaming, "Who the F are you?" And I point the camera at my mom's bedroom from the stairs and I see a person the size of a 5-year-old walking into my mom's room. Mark saw it too. I hung up with Mark saying I'll do something about this. I was crying for 2 hours until my mom and family got home. I do have schizophrenia and I thought I was tripping again, but it turns out I wasn't. My fiance also talks in his sleep. It has happened a few times where he sounds scared and is screaming as if he's being chased in his dream. Also, this other time he said in his sleep, "They're going to put the bodies in the bags." And I asked him, "The bodies in the bags? Why?" And his answer to that was, "Yeah, that's what they're going to do, put the bodies in the bags. I don't know why." And then he continued sleeping. In 2016, I was visiting a friend. I was 13 at the time, and I had never been to her house before, and we were playing on the second floor, but I needed to go downstairs to get my phone. As I came down the stairs, I looked in the kitchen, and there was this old woman. She introduced herself as my friend's grandma, and that it was almost time for dinner. So when I got my phone and went back upstairs, I told her. She stiffened and told me that I had to leave. I just thought, okay, probably because they didn't have enough dinner portion for me too, so I left. I talked to her a couple of years later, and I suddenly remembered the visit, so I brought it up, and that's when she told me that there was just the two of us at their house that day, and that her grandma was alive and well, and then she proceeded to tell me that they had a lot of paranormal stuff happening at their house. They even had priests visit to bless and cleanse the house. It got so bad they had to move out. I can still sometimes see the old woman's face when I close my eyes. I saw my mom standing in the bathroom, long dark hair and white dress. I thought it was my mom, but it wasn't. She was in the kitchen. I even said "Mom" to it from a distance. Then I looked away and it was gone. It looked exactly like the ring with hair over her face. The first time I fell asleep next to my now wife, it was on accident, so I didn't tell her beforehand that I have horrible nightmares pretty consistently. I apparently sat bolt upright in the middle of the night and screamed, "Get off of me!" at the top of my lungs. then immediately cuddled up against her side and went back to sleep. I can only imagine how confused she must have been. She still married me a few years later though, so a win is a win. I once took a picture of someone I knew walking up the stairs. I took it while they reached the top and thought nothing of it. Later, I found out that person's photo was taken on the other side of the building at the same time. The figure in my photo was dark, yet you could see the window frame behind it. After dropping off my friend at work during the day, I went to take a nap. I usually sleep with my door shut, but I heard the door open and close, and it looked like just him coming in. I was confused as to why he was home. That's when I realized I couldn't move or talk. I saw him walk around the bed, and then after a few seconds of silence, I felt pressure on my bed above my head, like someone was leaning on the mattress. Then I heard whispering in my ear, and it said, "I've got you now." To this day, I nap with the light on. As always, I love these stories, so please keep them coming, especially now that we're in spooky season. Okay, bye!
The Pacific Northwest has this set of rules. Now, you have to understand, this is a very supernatural place. There is something in those woods. And when you go out there, you're entering into another realm. Things can and do happen. People disappear, and a lot of people have had strange experiences in the Pacific Northwest. Now, the first rule of the Pacific Northwest is that you never go into the woods alone. Whether it's night or day, you do not go out there without another person, because there's stuff in those woods that tries to lure you, that tries to draw you in. The second rule, if you're camping out in those woods, you need to keep a fire going from dusk till dawn, because it's believed as long as you have a fire well lit, nothing negative will disturb you. The other thing with camping in those woods is it's always suggested that you set your tent up facing the north. You always want to be facing the North Star, because it's believed this will protect you from negative energy. Now, the third rule, right? If you hear, you see, you feel anything, you didn't. If you hear your name being called, if you hear music, if you hear singing, right? That is not real. Do not go towards it. The fourth rule, right? If you see an orb of light, you do not follow it. It will try and lure you into the woods. You will think, whoa, what is that? That's really cool. Do not follow it. The fifth rule, right? A lot of people say when they walk through the Appalachian woods, they've encountered what they describe as some kind of portal. And it will beckon you. It will call you to come into it. But you must never, ever go near that. You need to run away. Now, the last rule, anytime you go into the Pacific Northwest, you bring a firearm with you, and you bring one bullet. And if something negative comes your way, there are two options. Now, this is a story that comes out of the Pacific Northwest. It was in Northern California near Mount Shasta. There was this girl, and she said her father, Douglas, he went out on a hunting trip, and he went to somewhere near Mount Shasta. Now, he had gone on these trips many times before, never had any issues. This particular time, he goes to this new area in the woods to hunt for deer. Well, he said the first thing he noticed when he was going through the woods is that there was no wildlife. He didn't see a single deer. He didn't see any squirrels or, even insects. It was just completely quiet. So that night, he sets up his tent and he makes this big, huge fire. Eventually gets tired, he goes to bed. Well, he said he awoke to something shaking his tent. And the next thing he knows, he hears people talking all around him. And he said it was just coming from the woods, like people were having full-on conversations. So he unzips his tent, he goes outside, and he notices his campfire is out. And he starts hearing noises like going through the woods. And he said that's when he's seen all of these people just walking aimlessly around the woods, around his campsite. And he said they all had their head down. They looked very out of place. And that's when he runs over to his tent. He goes inside and he grabs his firearm and he just starts, hoping for the morning. He wakes up and he says, you know what? I'm out of here. I'm done hunting. Like, this is it. So he packs up his gear and he starts heading out. As he's walking this trail back to his car, he said he just got this really weird feeling. And all of a sudden in front of him, he starts to see this foggy mist start almost appearing in what looks like a perfect circle. And to him, it looked like some kind of portal. And he hears a voice calling his name, telling him to come. And he starts to feel himself moving closer and closer to this portal. And he said, he could tell that when he if he were to go into this thing, he knew that he wouldn't come back, that something was going to happen to him. But like, he couldn't control himself. He was just so interested in this thing. Finally, he snaps out of it and he takes off running down this trail back to his truck. And he gets out of there and he tells his wife and his daughter about what happened to him. 3 months after this, he's driving down the highway. When he's going over the bridge, he has a terrible accident. The car flips and he passes away. Now, his daughter, she believes still to this day, whatever he encountered out there in the woods had something to do with it.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. I got a call from myself. This happened to me when I was 16 years old, on the night that I got my very first smartphone. It was my birthday, and for months I had been begging my parents for an iPhone. So when I finally opened the box and saw it sitting there, I was ecstatic. I spent the entire day setting it up. I took pictures, recorded videos, downloaded games, texted my friends, and I probably touched every setting on that phone at least once. I was completely obsessed with it. That night, I asked my parents if I could keep it with me while I slept. Normally, they had a strict rule that I wasn't allowed to bring my phone into my bedroom at night. They didn't want me staying up late texting people or scrolling through things when I was supposed to be sleeping, but because it was my birthday, they made an exception. There it was, my brand new phone sitting beside me on the nightstand. Eventually, I drifted off, probably staring at it, but at some point in the middle of the night, my phone rang. The sound immediately woke me up, and for a second, I was completely disoriented. I thought that I had accidentally set an alarm, so I reached over, grabbed my phone, and looked at the screen. There was no name, no contact, just one word. Anonymous. I stared at it, confused and still half asleep. It was the middle of the night, and I couldn't imagine why anyone would be calling me. But either way, I answered. Hello? Static. And then a strange, faint hiss coming through the speaker. Hello? Still nothing. Still just static. So I hung up. I put the phone back beside me and tried to fall asleep, but about 10 minutes later, it rang again. Again, I picked it up. Again, I looked at the screen. And again, anonymous. It was weird, but I answered. This time, instead of saying hello, though, I asked, what? Silence. Just for a moment, because then I heard something familiar. A voice. My voice. It was me. There was no mistaking it. And it was saying one word over and over and over again. Hello? 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 Again and again and again. I didn't understand anything outside of the fact that I was listening to myself on the other end, but how? I didn't say anything. I just continued to listen. Hello? 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 Repeating over and over. My voice even fluctuated, like I was getting increasingly annoyed. It wasn't a recording. It was as if I was somewhere else, sitting in some same dark room, speaking to myself. I got so freaked out that I hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand, and while everything was silent again for just a few seconds, it vibrated. A text from my own number. I stared at the screen, trying to reread the numbers and convince myself that I must have been reading it wrong, but I wasn't, and only one message had come through. So I opened it. One word. Hello?
When I was 13, I had a premonition that I died, and it almost came true. I was on my bike in the dream, in some part of town that I didn't recognize. I was riding, and I remember this sign that was a sign for a restaurant of this guy in a chef's hat. And I was lost and starting to panic a little bit. So I see this hill, and I decide, well, this is probably a good idea for me to go down this hill because it's so steep that I'll go faster and I'll be able to get home. I was 13, okay? And I was panicking. And so I turn and I decide to go down this hill. Immediately a terrible idea, because I start, as you do, picking up speed. And It's a very long hill. Finally, I decide that I want to slow down, so I try to use the brakes, and it just makes my wheel wobble, which is terrifying, so I immediately stop doing that, and then I try to slow myself down with my feet, but I'm going so fast that it just skips off of the ground, and there's absolutely nothing I can do but just continue to go straight and hold on for dear life. And I get down at the bottom of this hill, and then it levels out, boom, and then I keep soaring straight, just trying to hope that I slow down enough to be able to stop myself, and then, boom, I wake up. And I'm in bed, and I'm sweating, and I'm terrified, and I check my body, and I'm fine. Everything is fine. Just a dream, just a bad dream. But it felt so real. I get up, I go about my day, everything is normal. Later that day, I'm hanging out with my friend, and he wants to go on a bike ride. I don't really think anything of it. Of course, this was just a dream that I had. Didn't even remember it at that point. We're on this bike ride, and he wants to visit a friend of his on the other side of town, this part of town that I've never been to. But I was feeling pretty confident, so I'm like, yeah, all right, let's go. So we ride over there. We're hanging out with his friend, and his friend wants to go do something with him, whatever. And I got to go home. So my friend just kind of leaves me to do that on my own in this part of town that I didn't recognize, which is kind of a shitty thing to do. So I start riding home. No idea where I am. I just kind of know the general direction. And finally, I get to this place where I can see this sign in the distance of this guy in this chef's hat. And as I'm riding up on this thing, I'm remembering this dream. And it's freaking me out a little bit. I'm like, this is a queer. I must have seen this at some point, whatever. But I'm staring at this sign like this doesn't feel right. Like I've seen this before. I've seen this whole scene before. And I start to get up close to it. And there's a hill to the left. You would think I would have made a better decision than to go down this hill yet again. That this is probably what that premonition was for, was, hey, Zach, don't do this, you'll die. But I still did. And I turn and I start going down this hill, and then the same feeling of terror, of this is immediately a horrible idea, overcomes me. And of course I start picking up speed, and the same things happen. Steering wheel's going out of control. And I start getting near the bottom of this hill, and I look forward and I see this road with this cross traffic. And I remember in the dream, I gotta do something. It's better for me to crash than to keep going. And so I get close to the bottom finally, boom, and there's this road that just to the right, this alleyway before this cross, and I immediately turn the wheel and I flip off of my bike and I'm going so fast, and I smash into this fence after dragging across the asphalt, and my skin is all messed up everywhere. I've got this, it's horrible. And my bike is still coming at me, and then my bike hits me. And then as I'm laying there in this agony, I turn over and I see this massive truck vroom, drive right by where I would have been had I kept going. And I just lay there in pain, in agony, just watching where I would have died and thinking, I dreamt this. And if I hadn't done that, I would be dead. My bike was messed up. I had to drag that thing all the way home. That wasn't very fun. Moral of the story is, do not go down steep hills on a bike. And if you have a dream where you die, take it seriously. So if you like that story, I have more.
From the Nightmare Society, this tale is called Parasites. Excitement flowed through his body as he felt a strong tug on his fishing rod. Hank had been sitting in his canoe for hours, contemplating whether he needed to pack up and go home. He wasn't sure if he would be able to catch anything in this pond, but he had been longing to try it since no one else knew its location. Hank enjoyed living off the grid as much as possible, and he disliked being around people, so this pond was perfect for his antisocial lifestyle. He briskly stood up and started to reel in his supper, but the line snagged and jolted him forward. Hank caught himself and tried again, but another harder jolt sent him tumbling over the edge. He hit the water harder than expected, sucking in large amounts of murky liquid. It was too deep to stand, and there were too many plants shrouding his movements. Hank began to panic. He fell beneath the surface again, more murky water filling his nose as he flailed. He sank further until he finally kicked away from the thick vegetation that seemed to cocoon him. Bursting to the surface, he could finally breathe again. He coughed and spit as pond water drained down his throat. Hank began to look around, but a thick fog had been rolling in. He couldn't spot his canoe. He swam close to the bank and pushed himself onto the damp soil and weeds. As he stood up, he scanned the pond until he spotted the tip of his wrecked vessel. He wondered how that fish caused him so much trouble. He stepped back into the water to retrieve his belongings. After hiking back to his trailer, Hank went to bed almost immediately. He was so sore from the unfortunate excitement. He was too exhausted to even eat. When he woke up the next morning, his body ached and his eyes itched uncontrollably. He hopped into the shower, feeling instant relief. But his throat began to hurt, and he dreamed about a cup of tea as the warm water trickled over his body. He stepped out of the shower and wiped the foggy mirror to reveal his gaunt appearance. He looked sleepy. His eyes were red and swollen, and his shoulders slumped. He brushed his teeth and went to make breakfast, though nothing seemed appealing to him. He stood in the kitchen making his tea and finally decided to just eat an apple. As he began to get ready for work, his throat went from bad to worse. The aching intensified, and chills shuddered through his body. His only option was to stay home. He laid on the couch in his dusty trailer, pondering how he got sick. Oh, it must have been that dirty pond water, he thought. He soon drifted back to sleep, hoping he would wake up and feel better. A tickle in his throat and then a loud cough soon jolted him from his slumber. His eyes were on fire. He tried rubbing them to no avail. Then his skin began to itch and burn as furiously as he raked his nails across his arm. The itching wouldn't stop. It was so intense, he started screaming throughout his entire tiny living room. He scratched deeper and deeper, ripping into his flesh and drawing blood. It was driving him mad. It felt as if millions of tiny razors were scraping against his body. He started biting into himself. Maybe his teeth would work. He just wanted the itching to stop. He ripped chunks from his wrists and spat them onto the floor. He could barely open his eyes, but he managed to stumble over to the kitchen's medicine cabinet. Nothing in it helped. As he reached the sink, his eyes swelled completely shut. He tried to scratch at them, but the prickling pain wouldn't stop. He dug a finger through the swollen lids and into his pupil. He forcefully swirled it around, turning his eyeball into mushy soup. He didn't even cry out in pain. He was pleased to stop the itching, if only for a moment. He pushed another finger into his other eye and ripped it straight from the socket. He dug deep into the hole and scratched at the flesh that was stuck to his bone. The itching intensified in his throat after that. His hand stumbled across the counter, finding a rough kitchen sponge he used to scrub the dishes with. He grabbed the long handle and put the coarse sponge into his mouth. He quickly forced it down his throat. The tough fibers ripped into his esophagus as he abrasively scraped into the tissue. He pushed the tool deeper and deeper until he began to choke. He still couldn't stop. The itching was too intense. He continued to pulsate the sponge down his gullet until he fell to the floor. His movement slowed as he asphyxiated. Moments later, he was dead. Blood began pooling around his body, and with it, tiny white specks could be seen squirming through the thick red liquid. If Hank was alive, and if he still had his eyes, he would have been able to see the writhing parasites that invaded his body after swallowing the pond water. Happy fishing.
People think if something is standing in the room, they will know immediately. That's the mistake. Here's what we don't think about. The human eye in darkness sees shapes and assigns them to known objects before it finishes processing what they actually are. A coat on a hook becomes a coat on a hook. A chair in a corner becomes a chair in a corner. Your brain wants resolutions, and it provides it before the information is complete, which means something standing in the corner of your room can be present for minutes before your brain stops assigning it to a piece of furniture and starts understanding what it actually is. First, if you wake up at night and the shape in your room looks slightly different than how it looks, do not look away from it and look back. Most people do. They tell themselves, it's just the dark playing tricks, and they look away to reset their perception. People who ignore this say something later. When they look back at the shape had moved. Not much, just enough to rule out the chair, and by then, they had already looked away twice, and given whatever it was, twice as long to decide what came next. Second, do not close your eyes. People who survive situations like this all realize one thing afterwards. Every time they closed their eyes, the shape was closer than when they opened them. Here's the part I saved for later. The figure in the corner was not hiding from you. It was waiting for your brain to decide it was furniture, and it had done this long enough to know exactly how long that actually takes.
One really scary thing that happened to me was when I was around 7 to 8 years old, when me and my family went to this man-made lake in, I believe was South Georgia. Basically just like this big dugout pond that the owner put some beach sand and some palm trees around, and then would charge people admissions to come in and park their cars and grill and hang out for the day. It also had a really big unsafe water slide that kids would always get hurt on. My brother was one of them. He got a huge scrape down his back, but that's not the point of the story. So my family would park in front of this little island that was kind of like this little clump of sand that was about 30-ish yards away from the main shoreline. So it was like a little island out in the middle. Now I was not the best swimmer at this time. I was only 7 or 8 years old, like I said, and the depth of the water was definitely above my head, but I was able to if I would jump down, bob up and down kind of, I would be able to bounce and touch the bottom and still be able to stay up. So I was doing that, essentially bobbing through the water, bouncing through the water to get to this island. And I remember as I was doing so, my foot came down on what felt like a face. I felt what was like a nose on my toe, and the unmistakable feeling of hair under the water. You know that, when your hair is all wavy and it feels real silky. It's unmistakable. So I ended up making it to the other side, and I was super freaked out because I'm thinking to myself, that's not normal. That was really fucking weird. Even at such a young age, I was able to clock that's unusual. So I sat there by myself on the shoreline for a little while, just trying to figure out what even just happened. But I was just a little kid, so I wasn't really able to think that deeply about it. My first thought was not, okay, I'm stepping on a human body. like that was a human face. My first thought was that it was just like a dead fish or something. But after what I know now of the situation, what I do remember of that day is hearing a frantic group, like a family, frantic family screaming this little kid's name and asking around if anybody had seen this little boy. And later that day, they ended up finding this little boy and pulling his body out of the lake right in front of that island that I was playing at earlier. I'm 27 years old now, and I can still remember the feeling of the hair between my toes, dude. And now lakes freak me out. Honestly, I can't be in a lake normally anymore. I can't even look at a lake normally anymore. But yeah, that was one of the most traumatic things that ever happened to me as a child, and honestly my brain just like didn't really register it for the longest time until I went to therapy and my therapist was like, what the fuck? Yeah, it's taken me a really long time to like kind of make peace with it, and honestly I don't even know if I have fully made peace with it. My foot touched I stepped on him. I can't.
Want to hear something scary? Have you ever played the left-right game? No? Me neither. Want to play it? To begin this game, you need a car like an SUV or one that can handle very rugged terrain. You'll also need navigation supplies and a starting point. And what I mean by that is you need to pick like an entrance to a highway or start to a road, just a designated spot that you put as your start point. You also need the emergency supplies and navigation supplies, and I say this because your car is going to lose power. Another important rule to mention is you can never turn right. You always need to turn left. Unless one of the rules explicitly states it, you need to always turn right. Left. Don't listen to me. Turn left. Left. Once you've made your first left turn, that means the game has begun. You'll notice that traffic probably disappears, the weather may change, you just might notice some strange things. Another thing you will notice is that there will be a lot of crossroads and forks in the road. This is to try to confuse you. Make sure you only turn left. As you escalate through the game, you may see strange things outside of your windows, such as entities, abandoned towns, roads that never end, etc. As you're driving, you may also see other travelers on the road. Some of them might be actual people playing the game who've gotten lost, and some of them might be entities trying to trick you, so I leave that up to your own discernment. But Kendall, what happens if you accidentally turn right? Your car will likely crash, vanish, or be stuck wherever you are forever, because the game will abruptly end, so don't do that. You'll be permanently trapped. So what's the point of the game? From what I've gathered, you try to get to the end of whatever road this is, and if you get there, you can get questions answered, or there will be some sort of supernatural progression. I also want to mention, I'm pretty sure this game was in Borrasca, if you know what that is. Shout out Creepcast. I listened to that story, it was really good. I think the left-right game is in Borrasca. I think that's what they're playing. So although I'm not brave enough to play this game, who knows? Maybe you are. Good luck.
I'm a search and rescue officer for the U.S. Forest Service, and I have some scary stories. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage, where creepy and cozy meet, so grab a plushie and get cozy. I have a pretty good track record for finding missing people. Most of the time, they just wander off the path or slip down a small cliff and they can't find their way back. Majority of them have heard the old stay where you are thing, and they don't wander far. But I've had 2 cases where that didn't happen. Both bother me a lot, and I use them as motivation to search even harder on the missing person cases I get called on. First was a little boy who was out berry picking with his parents. He and his sister were together, and both of them went missing around the same time. Their parents lost sight of them for a few seconds, and in that time, both kids apparently wandered off. When their parents couldn't find them, they called us, and we came out to search the area. We found the daughter pretty quickly, and when we asked where her brother was, she told us that he'd been taken away by, quote, the bear man. She said he gave her berries and told her to stay quiet, that he wanted her to play with her brother for a while. The last she saw her brother, he was riding on the shoulders of the bear man and seemed calm. Of course, our first thought was abduction, but we never found a trace of another human being in that area. The little girl was also insistent that he was not a normal man, but that he was tall and covered in hair like a bear. We searched that area for weeks. It was one of the longest calls I've ever been on, but we never found a single trace of that kid. The other was a young woman who went out hiking with her mom and grandpa. According to the mother, her daughter had climbed up a tree to get a better view of the forest, and she'd never come back down. They waited for her at the base of the tree for hours, calling her name before they called for help. Again, we searched everywhere and we never found a trace of her. I have no idea where she could have possibly gone because neither her mother nor grandpa saw her come down. A few times I've been out on my own searching with a canine, and they've tried to lead me straight up cliffs, not hills, not even rock faces, straight, sheer cliffs with no possible handholds. It's always baffling, and in those cases we usually find the person on the other side of the cliff or miles away from where the canine has led us. I was teamed up with another officer because we'd received reports of bears in the area. We were looking for a guy who hadn't come home from a climbing trip when he was supposed to, and we ended up having to do some serious climbing so we could get to where we figured he'd been. We found him trapped in a small crevice with a broken leg. It was not pleasant. He'd been there for almost 2 days, and his leg was very obviously infected. We were able to get him into a chopper, and I heard from one of the EMTs that the guy was absolutely inconsolable. He kept talking about how he'd been doing fine, and when he'd gotten to the top, a man had been there. He said that the guy had no climbing equipment, and he was wearing a parka and ski pants. He walked up to the guy, and when the guy turned around, he said he had no face. It was just blank. He freaked out and ended up trying to get off the mountain too fast, which is why he'd fallen. He said he could hear the guy all night climbing down the mountain and letting out these horrible muffled screams. The story bothered the hell out of me. I'm glad I wasn't there to hear it. One of the scariest things I've ever had happen to me involved the search of a young woman who'd gotten separated from her hiking group. We were out until late at night because the dogs had picked up her scent. When we found her, she was curled up under a large rotted log. She was missing her shoes and her pack, and she was clearly in shock. She didn't have any injuries, and we were able to get her to walk with us back to the base. Along the way, she kept looking behind us and asking why, quote, that big man with black eyes was following us. We couldn't see anyone, so we just wrote it off as some weird symptom of shock. But the closer we got to base, the more agitated this woman got. She kept asking me to tell him to stop making faces at her. At one point, she stopped and turned around and started yelling into the forest, saying that she wanted him to leave her alone. She wasn't going to go with him, she said, and she wouldn't give us to him. We finally got her to keep moving, but we started hearing these weird noises coming from all around us. It was almost like coughing, but more rhythmic and deeper. It was almost insect-like. When we were within sight of base ops, the woman turned to me, and her eyes are about as wide as I can imagine a human being's be. She touches my shoulder and says, quote, he says to tell you to speed up. He doesn't like looking at the scar on your neck. I have a very small scar on the base of my neck, but it's mostly hidden under my collar, and I have no idea how this woman saw it. Right after she says it, I hear that weird coughing right in my ear. I just about jumped out of my skin. I hustled her to the ops, trying not to show how freaked out I was, but I have to say I was really happy when we left the area that night. This is the last and probably weirdest story I have. On just about every case where we're really far into the wilderness, I'm talking 30 or 40 miles, at some point we'll find a staircase in the middle of the woods. It's almost like if you took the stairs in your house, cut them out, and put them in the forest. I asked about it for the first time I saw some, and the other officer told me not to worry about it, that it was normal. Everyone I asked said the same thing. I wanted to check them out, but I was told very emphatically that I should never go near any of them. I just ignore them now when I run into them because it happens so frequently. Well, this person has multiple parts and multiple stories about them being a search and rescue officer. So if you want more parts from this person, just let me know. And as always, if you have any scary stories of your own you'd like me to share, just send me a DM.
If you put your ring finger in a bullet hole at Gettysburg, people say you'll be engaged within a year. It sounds like a harmless piece of folklore, but that bullet hole is tied to one of the most tragic stories of the Civil War. Her name was Jenny Wade. She wasn't a soldier, she wasn't part of the battle, or at least she wasn't meant to, and she still became the only civilian killed during the Battle of Gettysburg. Some believe that this story comes from the speculation that Jenny Wade herself was engaged to a soldier named Jack Skelly, and she never got a chance to wear a ring, and maybe this is a way of giving that moment to someone else. That moment that she never had. She was just 20 years old, staying at her sister's house in the middle of a war zone. On July 3rd, 1863, where soldiers fought just streets away, Jenny was in the kitchen kneading dough to make bread for Union soldiers. And then a stray bullet passed through 2 doors and struck her from behind, killing her instantly. When her sister, who just had a baby, screamed, Union soldiers came and helped transport her body and the family to the basement where they waited out the rest of the battle with Jenny's body. Today, visitors can still see the doors where that bullet passed through. The legend about putting your ring finger through the bullet hole says something about how people interact with places like this, because over the years, visitors and staff have also reported strange experiences here. Footsteps in empty rooms, doors opening on their own, chains moving by themselves on the top floor, objects moving when no one else is nearby, images of a shadow person in a photo. The feeling that someone is still present and watching. Places like this carry something else. They carry memory, trauma, and different emotions. These are stories and experiences that don't just disappear. When so many people have had paranormal experiences in one place, one has to wonder, because Jenny Wade's story isn't just about ghosts. It's about what happens when war reaches the people it was never meant to touch, and sometimes that's what lingers the longest. What about you? Have you visited the Jenny Wade house? If so, did you have any experiences? Also, did you put your ring finger in the bullet hole? And if so, were you engaged within the year? Let me know in the comments. Also, if you want to visit the Jenny Wade house, do a ghost tour, or go on a paranormal investigation at the Jenny Wade house, be sure to reach out to Ghostly Images of Gettysburg.
Jenny never was concerned about marriage. Jenny was all about philanthropy, helping others, helping those in need. And one of the reasons why she sticks around, here's what's interesting. She actually is right outside the front door. She's right where that bullet hole is. And she's not there to help people get married. She's there to help people see their potential. And whatever that potential may be for you in that moment, in that time in your life, I think it's important that we see Jenny for the full woman and individual that she was. And it had nothing to do with being married. It had nothing to do with being someone's wife. It had to do with being of service. Her spirit is not inside the home and is not moving things around or causing any noise. Her spirit is actually there to comfort people, to teach people about the spirit world, to encourage people to reach whatever potential that is they want to reach. Because her whole intention was to help people see their potential, to help people who needed her help. As you can tell, I keep saying the word help because that's what she was about, helping. And I hope that that message, or this message about that side of her, is told more often than simply the fact that she wanted to be a wife. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be a wife, but she was so much more than that. The energies that are in that home that are, haunting it, if you will. Some energies are from the actual Gettysburg, but some of them are just traveling through. We've talked about this before, where haunted locations tend to attract other spirits, and then it just turns into sort of a mishmash of who's there, why they're there, what are they doing there. I think it doesn't always matter why they're there and who they are. I think what matters is that human beings start to discover and understand that they are much more than these physical bodies, and that there's a whole universe and spirit world out there well beyond this physical world.
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me give you guys a story time of this girl who grew up normal and then became disabled at the age of 12 years old, and only to find out that she was being used as a zombie by her uncle, who was a traditional healer. So we are going to call this girl Buttercup, right? So she was actually very smart from the time she started school, grade 1, 2, 3. She was in grade 6 when she started becoming disabled, right? She was very, very smart, you could tell that she has a bright future because she loved her books, she loved reading, she would watch shows about true crime. So when she grew up, she used to say she wants to become an investigating officer, whatever. Fine. So one day when she was 12 years old, they don't know what happened, she just started getting headaches, and from there, things just went downhill. They took her to the hospital. When she got to the hospital, they could not determine what was wrong with her. They said, no, we're going to try. And they tried doing tests, but still they couldn't find the cure. And eventually, I think they found a cause for the headaches, and they started giving her the right treatment, and everything was fine. And then she got discharged, and she went back home. And then she started being non-responsive. At this point, she started being non-responsive. She couldn't walk, she couldn't eat, she couldn't sleep, she couldn't nothing. She could sleep, but she couldn't do anything, right? She couldn't function. They took her back to the hospital, and the hospital was like, listen, your child will be dependent on you for like the rest of her life. More than 40%, I think, of her brain is gone. You know, they showed them the things, and it was just sad. So fun. She had a little sister, by the way, right? The little sister was, I think, 10 when she was 12. Fine. They grew up. Basically, the family has now started accepting that this is their fate. At this point, the girl is 21, right? Buttercup is 21. Her sister is... So at this point, the sister is 19. And the younger sister is 19 and the older sister is 21. And then she started having dreams of her sister. That, no man, the sister kept on telling her, like, I can see all of y'all. You know, oh, okay. Now, there is a traditional healer that lived with him. It was the mother's brother, right? He stayed within the area. So it was a house, and then he had his own room as well as his consultation room. You know, most when people come back from initiation school, they have to have the room where they consult and have their herbs, their stuff, and all of that. So he had that, and there was a room there, right? So the little sister dreamt of of Buttercup saying, you know, I can see all of y'all. Like, I can see all of y'all. I can see you guys, you know, I can see that you're fine, and I can see myself, but I'm unable to tell you guys where I'm at. And so she woke up after the little sister asked Buttercup, like, but where are you? And Buttercup did not respond because somebody called her, and she did, and the sister didn't see who it was, and then she disappeared. And then she woke up. She told her mom the story, and the mom was like, listen, baby, we've been to traditional healers, we've been to pastors, we've been to prophets, we've been to the doctor, nothing helped. She's 21 now. All of this started when she was 12. It will never change. The mom had given up hope. And then the younger sister let it go, right? And then she had a dream again of Buttercup, where Buttercup was being beaten, and she can't see the person that's beating her, but it's like, why must you talk? Why must you this? And they're hitting her with a shambok. If you don't know what a shambok is, go to Google. You'll see what it looks like. So he started beating her with that, started beating her, and then she woke up again, and she was crying. When she woke up, she found herself crying, and she told her mom. Her mom still did not take her seriously. She was like, just let it go. Maybe it's because you're thinking about her too much. You know, I've accepted, so should you, right? Fine. Now she keeps on dreaming of Buttercup. Eventually, remember, I have an aunt who is a prophet. Eventually, they go to my aunt who is a prophet, whatever, and she went with her father. Her father and her mother had separated, but they had them too, and then after a while they separated. Her father and her, the younger sister, went to a prophet because she had been telling her dad that, no man, I've been dreaming of this. And the dad was like, you know what, like, I don't want to give up hope, because I feel like the mom did not want to raise her hopes high and think, yo, we're going to finally save my child. Next thing you know, you raise your hopes thinking it's going to be fine, and then it doesn't get better. I think that's how the mom was feeling. That's why she just didn't want to entertain it. Fine. They go to my aunt and they tell her the situation. They tell her that she tells her that I've been dreaming. My aunt is like, no, wait, I'm going to tell you. It's like, you've been dreaming, whatever. Also, they gave me permission to share the story, you know, because I know y'all. So she's like, no, you've been dreaming, and you've been dreaming of your sister. And she's right. Her spirit is lingering, but her spirit is not far from y'all. And then they're like, I see a traditional healer in the family. And it's not the only one. But don't get confused. Don't think about the one that's far. Think about the one that's near. Because if you think about the one that's far, or you think of them both, you are going to confuse yourself. And then they told her that she needs to be strong spiritually. And then they gave her a necklace thingy and things on her hands and her feet. They're like, you are going to help your sister. She wants you to help her. But know that once you help her, darkness is going to come. And then she was like, is she going to suffer? What's going to happen? And my aunt was like, I can't tell you what that means, but you can save her. Nothing's going to happen to you guys, but darkness is going to be there. I see a lot of pain. I see a lot of hurt, but you guys are going to be fine. Okay, she goes to sleep that day, and she's just walking around their house, and the sister peeks, and she's like, psst, come here. Buttercup, right? Peeks, and it's like, psst, come here. In the at 3, mind you. And then like the little sister goes to her and is like, Auntie, where are you? Why can't you tell me where you are? And she's like, listen, since they've strengthened you, now I can tell you. I'm inside that room over there. That was the uncle's hut for the consultation room over there. So like, I'm inside there. You need to go in there and burn every single thing, like light that thing on fire, and I will be fine. And the little sister's like, I might get into trouble. She's like, you are not gonna get into trouble. And she's like, I can't burn it. Like, I'm sorry, I can't. Like, what if you're playing me, whatever, I can't. And she's like, okay, fine. If you're scared of burning the thing, it's just gonna burn on its own then. Go inside there when this man is not home. He's gonna leave tomorrow. Right? She's like, he's gonna leave tomorrow. Inside one of those baby dolls that are seated like this, open one of their heads, open that. When you find that mayonnaise bottle, take whatever's inside there and break it in the middle of the thing, right? And then he was like, bring some ashes and just throw them on there and then leave. That's all you need to do. And he was like, listen, you only have a couple of hours to do this. Do not waste time. I know there are a lot of them, but when you get in there, you must just keep on twisting heads. You will find it. Okay, fine. Younger sister now wakes up after that. She's like, hi, okay. She doesn't tell her mom anything, doesn't tell her dad anything. She's chilled. Because another thing that Buttercup told in the dream is, do not tell anybody what you're going to do, because this man has things that here for him and I will get into trouble. You know, I escaped for a little bit because he sent me to go to work. That's what he does with me. He sends me to go to work and I protect her when he's not home. And I don't know why he used me, right? Fine. Hi, the sister's like, okay. So one day the uncle is leaving and the sister is like, oh, the following day, the uncle is leaving, right? He's going to help clients or whatever. He's going to their house. And the little sister's like, uncle, can I please borrow your house key? I just want to sit inside. I want to watch TV there. And the uncle's like, okay, it's fine. The uncle was a good person in their eyes. Fine. She sits there, whatever, and she starts looking around. She looks for the key to the traditional thingy and she finds it. She takes it. As the car goes away, she opens. As she opens, she twists the thing. Guys, lo and behold, she twisted one of them and as she went inside, there was a mayonnaise bottle. There was Buttercup's picture in there, and there was a piece of something that she doesn't know what it was, and it smelled terrible. She broke it in the middle of the room and then closed the thing, closed the door, put the key back, closed the back room. When I tell you, that man came back, right? The uncle came back very fast. And he was like, something happened in here. What did you do? And he was shouting at the little sister. And she was like, I didn't do anything. I didn't touch anything. I wanted to come. And then the mother's like, what's going on? What did she do? She's like, no, man, she broke my thing. And the sister is like, I didn't go in there. Mama, did you see me going in there? The mom is like, I didn't see you. I don't know what happened. Hey, as they were talking, Mercy, they start smelling smoke. Everybody is now smelling smoke because like he went crazy and then he went outside. He went crazy and then he went inside the room and found that thing broken, and then he went after the little sister to shout at her, and then they went outside with the mother to come and see what's going on, whatever. Yeah. After that thing burned to ashes and the uncle started going crazy. We don't know what happened. They don't know what happened either. Fine. The sister started responding. She started responding. She started looking at them. She started holding them and everything. Unfortunately, all the darkness that my aunt was talking about was that after she was freed, she was tired. Her spirit was tired. She got an infection and she passed away. But at least she was safe. At least she was saved. Spiritually so. She did pass away, y'all. It was so sad, but at least she was not that man's slave anymore. As for the uncle, y'all, he went crazy. And that's when they told the mom what had happened with the dad. And the mom was like, they need to go back. They went back and were like, the ancestors are punishing him, so he's never going to be fine. He's never going to be sane again, and there's nothing that you can do, because I won't help you guys help a person that destroyed a child's life at 12 years old. No.
Am I the asshole for wanting to break up with my boyfriend? So my boyfriend and I have been dating for about 3 years. For the sake of keeping him anonymous, I will refer to him as Chad. See, Chad and I were doing great. We both had good jobs and big plans ahead together. I even thought that he was going to propose in a couple months. But then one night we got into a car accident. I still think it was the fault of the other guy, but this isn't what I'm here to talk about. Long story short, Chad doesn't talk to me anymore. He doesn't do anything these days besides sit on the couch and glare at me. I mean, I tried to be a good girlfriend and stay with him. I know he doesn't have any living relatives to take care of him. And I didn't stay out of, pity or guilt or anything. I mean, I stayed with him because I love him, but With each passing day, it just seems like he doesn't care about any of that hard work. I mean, he doesn't eat or take care of himself anymore. The stench in our apartment is unbearable, and his skin just keeps turning more and more green. I am trying, guys, like I really am, but it feels like I'm fighting a losing battle. I mean, I still love my boyfriend, but it seems like he was much happier in that hole I had to get him out of.
Sometimes people think if a hiking trail looks empty in the middle of the day, it means you have the whole place to yourself. That's the mistake. If you're walking through a forest trail and suddenly stop hearing birds, insects, or wind in the trees, do not keep walking at the same pace. Stop for a moment and listen carefully, because forests almost never go silent. First, check the trail behind you. If the dirt path looks slightly disturbed, like someone stepped there recently, but you've never passed anyone on the trail, do not turn around to study the footprints too closely. Most people kneel down to inspect them. That's when they realize something else stopped there. Second, listen for branches. If you hear a branch snap somewhere off the trail, but it doesn't sound like it's moving away from you, do not call out. People who shouted to ask if someone was there said the sound stopped immediately after. Not like someone froze, more like something was waiting to see if you noticed it. Third, start walking back towards the trailhead. Do not run, do not leave the path. If the sound of footsteps begin matching yours from somewhere in the trees, but you never see anything moving between them, do not look directly into the forest, just keep walking. Because sometimes a quiet forest isn't empty. Sometimes everything stopped making noise for the same reason. Something entered the trail that the forest itself didn't want to disturb.
I had a bad gut feeling about my coworker, and a year later, I saw him on the news for doing something horrible. I'm a big proponent of always trusting your gut feeling, and this next story is a good example of why. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage, where creepy and cozy meet. So grab a plushie and get cozy. Years ago, I worked with a guy who gave me weird vibes pretty early on. I couldn't explain why. He hadn't actually done anything wrong to me, and he wasn't openly aggressive or creepy. He was mostly just socially awkward and a little strange. Naturally, I told myself I was probably being judgmental. Not every socially awkward person is dangerous, obviously. One day, he invited our team to his apartment for dinner. Quite a few people originally agreed to go, so he bought everything and cooked for everyone. Then people started canceling, some of them pretty much last minute. I felt sorry for him. He'd gone through all that effort, and I imagined how horrible it would feel if no one showed up, so I decided I would still go. Once I got there, though, something felt off. When I got there, I took a selfie with him and sent it to our coworkers to let him know I'd shown up. At the time, it was basically like, look who actually came, kind of thing. Looking back, I've sometimes wondered whether there was another reason I instinctively wanted people to know where I was. I ate as quickly as I could and told him I needed to leave because it was getting dark. Then he offered to take the bus with me to make sure I got home safely. I politely declined. I didn't want him coming with me. I just wanted out of there. I left that job about a month later, but he continued messaging me afterwards asking to meet up. I kept declining and telling him I was busy, which wasn't always true. Eventually, he kept messaging enough that I got annoyed and blocked him. Then I basically forgot about him. About a year later, I saw his face on the news. He had unalived a young woman and buried her in his garden of the same apartment where I'd sat alone having dinner with him. I can't really describe the feeling of realizing that. And as more information came out during the investigation and trial, it became so much worse. They talked about serious psychological problems and described him as having a narcissistic personality with tendencies towards psychosis. There was also a discussion during the case about him having a deeply rooted hatred of women connected to his relationship with his mother. Suddenly, the slightly strange, socially awkward coworker I'd convinced myself was harmless looked very different in hindsight. My conscious brain was saying, he's awkward, stop judging him, he cooked for everyone and everyone canceled, don't be rude. Meanwhile, something much more primitive in me was saying, get out of his apartment now, and I listened. Finding out a year later what he was capable of completely changed the way I looked at those feelings. I don't think every weird vibe means someone is secretly dangerous. Most of the time, it probably means absolutely nothing. But if I'm ever alone somewhere and my entire body is suddenly telling me I need to leave, I'm not sticking around anymore just because I'm afraid of hurting someone's feelings. I'd rather be rude and wrong than polite and right. I've had personal experiences of this where I ignored my gut feeling and I should have listened to it. I know many other people who have had the same experiences. Let me know if you've ever had a gut feeling about something and you ignored it and regretted ignoring it, because gut feelings can be really, really powerful. There's something instinctive in us that our body tries to tell us, like, something's scary or wrong, or just something isn't right and we need to watch out, and we always ignore it. And we should always at least like pay attention to it somewhat, I think. But let me know what you think, and if you have any scary stories of your own you'd like me to read, just send me a DM.
You got your late night snack? This is Last Thread Before Bed, episode 43. This is a little series where I read scary stories from Reddit before I go to bed, and I try not to get nightmares. Side note, I'm feeling the spooky vibe, so I'm in the mood to whisper. I feel like that makes it more creepy sometimes. Let's get into it. So tonight's story is on the subreddit Scary Stories, and this user's name is R. Grace Sauce. Horrifying experience during quarantine. I was upstairs in my room one night, playing video games with the volume really loud, when I thought I heard noises coming from downstairs. I muted the TV and listened closer. Nothing. I resumed playing the game for another hour, when I heard it again, only louder. I was sure I heard it this time and was a little freaked out. To assure myself, I went downstairs to the basement where I thought I heard the noise coming from. As soon as I opened the basement door, I was hit with a cold breeze. I went downstairs and saw the window wide open. I was 100% sure I had closed and locked all the windows in the house. I was ready to make a run for it when something stopped me. I turned around and for the first time noticed the closet door was slightly cracked open. I don't like where this is headed. I stood for what seemed like 30 minutes in front of that door, debating whether I should open it. I moved closer and put my hand on the doorknob. All of a sudden, I heard a creepy crackle coming from inside the closet. I've never run faster up a flight of stairs before. I locked the door and called the cops, who had an unusually fast response time. They came in and searched the house, and not even 5 minutes into their search, I heard a gunshot from downstairs. A few minutes later, they came out with a deranged-looking man, probably homeless. They put him in the back of the car and told me they had opened the door and the man was holding a gun, shot at them and missed. He luckily missed, and the cops disarmed him and arrested him. The scariest part was how close I was to opening that door and likely being murdered. Yeah, that's probably true. Somebody said, "You're one lucky bastard. Ever tried the lottery?" No, this was a good one though. I mean, this really could happen to anybody. I'm trying to start leaning more towards doing more real than paranormal. And by that, I mean just more situations like this, opposed to like ghost stories and things like that. But I love them all though. Let me know what y'all thought about this one and follow for more.
Bro, what's going on around?
Creepy True Reddit Stories That Keep Me Up at Night, Part 15. Growing up, my sister and I were good friends with our neighbor Matt, who had a dog, Molly. Molly ran away one day, so the three of us set out into the nature preserve behind our houses to look for her. Matt's brother, Chris, set out separately. In the preserve is an old dam and mill from the 1700s that is rumored to be haunted. When we got to the mill, we saw Chris and the dog on the other side of the river, maybe 30 yards away. "Matt, I got her. I'm bringing her home," Chris yelled. But something didn't feel right, and the three of us gave each other that look. We headed home, knowing Chris would be a bit behind us, since he'd have to go a mile or two out of his way to cross the bridge. When we got home, there was Matt's mom and the dog. She was under the porch the whole time, she said. A little while later, Chris showed up, having never even gone into that part of the woods. Follow for more creepy true Reddit stories.